1. The Dyatlov Pass Incident. January 23, 1959. Northern Ural Mountains, Soviet Union, now Russia. On January 23, 1959, a group of 9 experienced hikers left the city of Sverdlovsk with one goal: to complete a challenging winter expedition across the remote Ural Mountains. They were all highly trained, physically fit, and certified in advanced mountain hiking. Their journey was considered difficult but not impossible. None of them imagined that within a few weeks, every member of the group would be dead, and their final hours would become one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in modern history. The expedition was led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student with extensive hiking experience. Alongside him were 8 fellow students and graduates, all skilled in surviving harsh winter conditions. Their planned route would take them through the mountain known as Kholat Syakhl, a name from the local Mansi language that translates to Mountain of the Dead. At the time, no one paid much attention to that chilling name. Before leaving, Dyatlov promised that once the group completed the expedition, he would send a telegram to their sports club. Based on the schedule, the message was expected by February 12. When that date passed without any communication, relatives initially assumed the hikers had simply been delayed by bad weather. However, several more days passed with complete silence. Concern quickly turned into fear. On February 20, 1959, search teams consisting of volunteers, students, military personnel, and rescue workers began looking for the missing expedition. After several days of searching through deep snow and freezing temperatures, they discovered the group's abandoned campsite on the eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl. The scene immediately confused investigators. The tent was still standing, partially covered by snow. Even stranger, it had been cut open from the inside with a knife. Instead of using the entrance, the hikers had sliced through the fabric as though they were desperate to escape within seconds. Inside the tent, nearly everything remained behind. Heavy winter coats, boots, gloves, food, maps, cameras, personal belongings. For experienced mountaineers, leaving a tent in the middle of a freezing winter night without proper clothing made absolutely no sense. Temperatures that night were estimated to be below 25 degrees Celsius, 13 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to cause fatal hypothermia in a short time. Investigators followed footprints leading away from the tent. Surprisingly, the tracks showed that the hikers had not been running wildly. Many appeared to be walking calmly, some barefoot, others wearing only socks, and a few with a single shoe. About 1.5 kilometers away, beneath a large cedar tree, searchers found the first 2 bodies. They were dressed only in underwear. Both had attempted to light a small fire using broken tree branches. The bark of the cedar tree had been stripped several meters high, suggesting that one or both victims had climbed it, possibly trying to spot something near the campsite or escape from an unseen danger. Not far from the cedar tree, 3 more bodies were discovered lying between the tree and the abandoned tent. It appeared they had been trying to return. Their positions suggested they collapsed one after another, never making it back to shelter. Over the following months, as the snow melted, rescuers discovered the remaining 4 hikers inside a nearby ravine under several meters of snow. Unlike the first 5 victims, these 4 showed horrifying injuries. One suffered a massive skull fracture. 2 had crushed chests so severe that medical experts compared the force to a high-speed car crash. One young woman, Ludmila Dubinina, was missing her tongue, eyes, and part of her lips. Another victim had missing eyes. Yet remarkably, many of these devastating internal injuries showed very little external damage to the skin. The strange condition of the bodies immediately fueled speculation. The official autopsy concluded that 6 hikers died from hypothermia, while 3 died from severe traumatic injuries. However, the reports could not explain what had caused those injuries or why the group fled the tent in the first place. Then investigators noticed another disturbing detail. Some of the victims' clothing contained unusually high levels of radioactive contamination. Although not enough to explain their deaths, the discovery added another layer of mystery. Why would ordinary university students carry radioactive clothing into the mountains? No clear answer was ever provided. Even stranger were the witness reports. Several people in nearby areas claimed to have seen glowing orange lights or mysterious fireballs moving across the night sky during the same period. Military personnel also reportedly observed unusual aerial lights. These reports led many to suspect secret Soviet military testing. According to one theory, the hikers accidentally entered a restricted military zone where experimental weapons were being tested. A blast wave from a secret explosion might explain the severe internal injuries while leaving little external damage. If military officials were involved, some believe evidence could have been hidden to protect classified operations. Another theory focused on avalanches. For decades, scientists believed a small slab avalanche may have struck the campsite during the night. Fear of another slide could have forced the hikers to cut through the tent and escape immediately. However, critics pointed out several problems. The slope where the tent stood showed little evidence of a large avalanche. The tent itself remained partially upright. Footprints survived in the snow. And experienced mountaineers like Dyatlov's team would likely have recognized avalanche risks before choosing their campsite. Others proposed an even stranger explanation known as katabatic winds, violent downhill winds capable of producing terrifying noise and powerful gusts. Such winds might have convinced the hikers that remaining inside the tent was too dangerous. There were also theories involving infrasound. Certain wind conditions around mountain peaks can generate extremely low-frequency sound waves. Although humans cannot consciously hear them, some researchers suggest they may trigger panic, anxiety, confusion, or an overwhelming urge to escape. This theory remains controversial because there is little direct evidence linking infrasound to such extreme behavior. Of course, more sensational explanations soon appeared. Some believed the hikers encountered a mysterious creature similar to the legendary Yeti. Others suggested alien visitors. Some even claimed paranormal forces connected to the Mountain of the Dead. Despite decades of speculation, no credible evidence has ever confirmed these extraordinary claims. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the investigation using modern forensic techniques. After reviewing the available evidence, officials concluded that the most likely explanation involved a small avalanche combined with extreme weather conditions that ultimately led to hypothermia. Then, in 2021, researchers published computer simulations suggesting that a delayed slab avalanche could indeed have produced injuries similar to those found on several victims. Yet many investigators and independent researchers remain unconvinced. The unusual injuries. The radioactive clothing. The missing tongue. The glowing lights. The cut-open tent. Each detail continues to raise questions that no single theory fully answers. More than 65 years later, the Dyatlov Pass incident remains one of history's most haunting unsolved mysteries. 9 experienced hikers entered the frozen mountains together. Not one of them returned. And what truly happened during that freezing night on Kholat Syakhl may never be known. 2. The D.B. Cooper Mystery. November 24, 1971. Between Portland, Oregon and Seattle, Washington, United States. On the afternoon of November 24, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving, a neatly dressed man walked into Portland International Airport carrying nothing more than a small black briefcase. He looked calm, polite, and completely ordinary. Witnesses later described him as being in his mid-40s, around 6 feet tall, wearing a dark business suit, a white shirt, a thin black tie secured with a mother-of-pearl tie clip, and dark sunglasses. Nothing about his appearance suggested that within a few hours he would commit one of the most daring crimes in aviation history, and then disappear forever. The man purchased a one-way ticket on Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, traveling from Portland, Oregon, to Seattle, Washington. The ticket cost just $20, and he signed the reservation using the name Dan Cooper. Due to a misunderstanding by early newspaper reports, the world would forever know him as D.B. Cooper, even though no evidence has ever shown he actually used those initials. At approximately 2:50 p.m., Flight 305 took off with 36 passengers, 6 crew members, and Cooper seated quietly near the rear of the aircraft. Shortly after takeoff, he ordered a bourbon and soda, lit a cigarette, which was perfectly legal on flights at the time, and handed a folded note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. At first, she assumed it was another passenger trying to flirt with her and slipped the note into her purse without reading it. Cooper leaned toward her and calmly said, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Shocked, she opened the paper. The message stated that Cooper was carrying an explosive device and wanted her to sit beside him. When she did, Cooper quietly opened his briefcase just enough for her to glimpse several red cylinders connected by wires and what appeared to be a battery. She never touched the device, but she later testified that it looked convincing enough to believe it was a real bomb. Cooper then explained exactly what he wanted. He demanded $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, 2 main parachutes and 2 reserve parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting in Seattle to refuel the aircraft immediately after landing. He instructed the crew not to alert the passengers. The pilots contacted air traffic control, which informed the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and airline officials. Rather than risk the lives of everyone on board, authorities decided to meet Cooper's demands. Meanwhile, the passengers remained completely unaware that their flight had been hijacked. To buy time while the ransom money and parachutes were gathered, the aircraft circled the Seattle area for nearly 2 hours. Throughout the ordeal, Cooper remained astonishingly calm. He never shouted. He never threatened anyone unnecessarily. He even paid for his drink. Crew members later recalled that he appeared knowledgeable about aviation. He seemed familiar with the aircraft's capabilities, cruising speed, and even pointed out landmarks visible below. His confidence suggested he had either military experience, aviation training, or both. At approximately 5:45 p.m., the aircraft landed in Seattle. The passengers were allowed to leave safely. Authorities delivered $200,000 in ransom money, packed in $10,020 bills, each with recorded serial numbers, along with the requested parachutes. Once the exchange was complete, Cooper released the flight attendant who had originally received his note but ordered the pilots, another flight attendant, and the flight engineer to prepare for another flight. His new destination was Mexico City. However, he instructed the pilots to fly low, around 10,000 feet, with the landing gear partially deployed and the wing flaps set at a specific angle to reduce speed. These unusual instructions puzzled aviation experts. Not every aircraft could safely fly under those conditions. Yet Cooper knew exactly what he wanted. The pilots explained that the aircraft lacked enough fuel to reach Mexico. Cooper agreed to make a refueling stop in Reno, Nevada. At 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 departed Seattle into the cold, rainy night. Only 5 people remained on board besides Cooper. About 30 minutes into the flight, Cooper instructed everyone else to stay inside the cockpit and close the door. The crew obeyed. At approximately 8:13 p.m., the pilots noticed a sudden change in cabin pressure. At the same moment, the aircraft's tail experienced an unusual upward movement, indicating that the rear stairway had likely been lowered. Somewhere over the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest, in darkness, heavy rain, and strong winds, D.B. Cooper apparently jumped from the aircraft carrying the ransom money strapped to his body. No one saw him leave. No radio transmission followed. He simply vanished into the night. When the aircraft landed safely in Reno, investigators rushed aboard. Cooper was gone. The rear staircase was open. 2 parachutes were missing. The ransom money had disappeared. But strangely, Cooper had left behind several clues. Investigators recovered his black clip-on tie, the tie clip, several cigarette butts, and a few fingerprints. Unfortunately, many of these items were either lost over time or contaminated before modern forensic science could fully analyze them. The FBI immediately launched one of the largest investigations in its history. The operation became known as NORJAC, short for Northwest Hijacking. Hundreds of soldiers, FBI agents, helicopters, and search teams combed forests, rivers, mountains, and fields across Washington state. Nothing. No parachute. No body. No briefcase. No clothing. No confirmed trace of Cooper. Years passed with no answers. Then, in 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was digging in the sand along the banks of the Columbia River near Vancouver, Washington, when he uncovered something extraordinary. Buried beneath the sand were bundles of badly decayed $20 bills. Authorities confirmed the serial numbers matched Cooper's ransom money. The discovery shocked investigators. But it also created another mystery. How had only a small portion of the money ended up buried there? Did Cooper survive and lose some of the cash? Or had the river carried it there years later? No one could explain it. Over the decades, more than 1,000 suspects were investigated. Some were former military paratroopers. Others were experienced skydivers, airline employees, engineers, or career criminals. Several confessed. Some deathbed confessions attracted enormous media attention. Yet every claim eventually collapsed under closer examination. No suspect has ever been conclusively linked to the hijacking. Modern DNA testing has also failed to solve the mystery. Although scientists recovered a partial DNA profile from Cooper's tie, the sample is incomplete and may not even belong to him. Since the tie could have been handled by multiple people before the hijacking, investigators cannot rely on it as definitive evidence. Researchers have also analyzed tiny particles found on the tie, including rare metallic residues associated with aerospace manufacturing. Some experts believe these particles suggest Cooper may have worked in the aviation or chemical industry during the 1960s. While intriguing, the evidence remains circumstantial. The biggest question, however, is whether Cooper survived the jump. Many investigators believe he likely died. The weather was freezing, visibility was poor, and he jumped into rugged wilderness at night wearing business shoes and a suit rather than proper skydiving gear. Others argue the opposite. They point out that Cooper chose specific flight conditions, requested multiple parachutes, and appeared unusually knowledgeable about aircraft operations. To them, his confidence suggests careful planning rather than desperation. In 2016, after 45 years of investigation, the FBI officially suspended active efforts on the case to focus resources on higher priority investigations. However, the case itself was never solved. To this day, no one knows the true identity of D.B. Cooper. No one knows whether he survived. No one knows where the remaining $200,000 went. What began as an ordinary afternoon flight ended with a man stepping into the darkness and disappearing without a trace. More than half a century later, D.B. Cooper remains the only unidentified person in American history to successfully hijack a commercial airliner and seemingly vanish forever. 3. The Mary Celeste. November 7, 1872. Departed from New York Harbor, United States, found adrift near the Azores, Atlantic Ocean. On November 7, 1872, a merchant brigantine named Mary Celeste departed New York Harbor on what appeared to be a routine commercial voyage. The ship was bound for Genoa, Italy, carrying a cargo of approximately 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol. On board were Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs, his wife Sarah Briggs, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and a crew of 7 experienced sailors. Captain Briggs was not an inexperienced seaman. By 37 years of age, he had earned a reputation as one of America's most respected and cautious captains. Friends described him as deeply religious, disciplined, and highly skilled at sea. His crew had also been carefully selected, each possessing years of maritime experience. Nothing about the voyage suggested that it would become one of the greatest maritime mysteries in history. Before departure, the ship underwent inspection and was declared seaworthy. Supplies were loaded for several months, navigation instruments were checked, and weather forecasts showed no signs of an unusually dangerous crossing. On November 15, the Mary Celeste made its final confirmed entry in the ship's logbook while sailing east across the Atlantic Ocean. Everything appeared normal. The crew recorded weather conditions, the ship's position, and routine sailing information. Then, the entries stopped. No distress signal was ever sent. No emergency message was received. The ship simply disappeared into the vast Atlantic. Nearly a month later, on December 4, 1872, another British merchant ship named Dei Grazia was sailing roughly 400 miles east of the Azores Islands when Captain David Morehouse noticed a vessel drifting strangely through the ocean. At first glance, something felt wrong. The ship was weaving unpredictably. Its sails were partially raised. No one appeared on deck. Despite repeated signal flags and calls, there was no response. Concerned, Captain Morehouse ordered a boarding party to investigate. What they discovered would puzzle the world for more than 150 years. The ship was the Mary Celeste. But there wasn't a single person on board. The captain was gone. His wife was gone. Their young daughter was gone. Every crew member had vanished. There were no signs of violence. No blood. No struggle. No bodies. No evidence of piracy. The cargo remained almost entirely untouched. Food supplies were still stocked. Fresh drinking water was available. The crew's clothing and personal belongings remained neatly stored in their cabins. The galley contained cooking utensils exactly where they had been left. In one cabin, a sewing machine still held unfinished fabric. In another, the captain's shaving equipment remained in place. Everything suggested that whoever had left the ship expected to return shortly. Yet they never did. Investigators found that one lifeboat was missing. The ship's sextant, marine chronometer, and navigation papers had also disappeared, items a captain would naturally take if abandoning ship. However, nearly everything else remained. Even more puzzling, the vessel itself was still perfectly capable of sailing. Although it had taken on some water in the bilge, the amount was considered normal for ships crossing the Atlantic during that era. The pumps were partially disassembled, but later inspections suggested they were still functional. The sails had suffered minor damage, but nothing severe enough to justify abandoning the vessel. Why would an experienced captain voluntarily leave a seaworthy ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean? That question remains unanswered. When the Mary Celeste was brought into Gibraltar, authorities immediately became suspicious. Under maritime law, the crew of the Dei Grazia stood to receive a substantial salvage reward for recovering an abandoned ship. This led prosecutors to consider an alarming possibility. What if the crew of the Dei Grazia had murdered everyone aboard the Mary Celeste and fabricated the abandonment story? An official inquiry began. Captain Morehouse and his crew were questioned extensively. Investigators searched both vessels for evidence of violence. Nothing was found. No bloodstains. No hidden cargo. No stolen valuables. No evidence connected the rescuers to any crime. Eventually, the murder theory collapsed. Attention then shifted toward the cargo. The Mary Celeste was transporting industrial alcohol stored inside wooden barrels. Later inspections revealed that several barrels were empty. Interestingly, they were made from porous red oak rather than white oak, allowing small amounts of alcohol vapor to escape over time. Some researchers proposed that leaking fumes may have frightened Captain Briggs. Perhaps he feared a catastrophic explosion. According to this theory, he temporarily evacuated everyone into the lifeboat while the fumes dispersed. A rope may have connected the lifeboat to the ship. If that rope snapped during rough seas, the Mary Celeste would have drifted away, leaving those in the lifeboat stranded in the open ocean. This explanation remains one of the most widely accepted theories. Yet it also raises difficult questions. Why abandon a ship that showed no signs of fire? Why leave enough food and water for months behind? Why would such an experienced captain risk placing his family, including a 2-year-old child, into a tiny lifeboat in the middle of the Atlantic? Other theories quickly emerged. Some suggested pirates attacked the vessel. However, pirates rarely leave valuable cargo untouched. Others blamed mutiny. But there was no evidence of violence or conflict among the crew. Insurance fraud was also proposed. According to this theory, the captain intentionally abandoned the ship to collect money. But investigators found no financial motive, and Captain Briggs had an excellent professional reputation. Natural disasters became another possibility. A waterspout, a tornado over the ocean, might have terrified the crew into abandoning ship. Others suggested a sudden seaquake or underwater volcanic activity could have created unusual waves without leaving obvious damage. Still others believed a rogue wave temporarily flooded the deck, convincing Captain Briggs that the ship was sinking. Yet every natural explanation encounters the same obstacle. The Mary Celeste remained remarkably intact. Its condition simply did not match the behavior expected from experienced sailors abandoning a perfectly usable vessel. Over the years, more imaginative theories appeared. Some blamed giant squids. Others suggested sea monsters. Paranormal enthusiasts claimed ghostly forces haunted the ship. Alien abduction theories also surfaced during the 20th century. Despite their popularity in books and television programs, no credible evidence has ever supported these extraordinary claims. One reason the mystery became so famous is because fiction blurred the facts. In 1884, author Arthur Conan Doyle published a fictional short story inspired by the Mary Celeste. Although he changed many details, readers mistakenly believed much of the story was historically accurate. As a result, myths surrounding the ship spread around the world. Stories of untouched meals still sitting on tables, coffee cups left warm, and frightened sailors fleeing invisible horrors. Most of these details were invented and were never documented by investigators. Even after separating fact from fiction, the real mystery remains astonishing. A fully stocked ship, a skilled captain, an experienced crew, a healthy family, a seaworthy vessel, and then complete silence. No confirmed wreckage of the missing lifeboat has ever been found. No bodies were ever recovered. No diary explained what happened. No witness ever reported seeing the final moments aboard the Mary Celeste. More than 150 years later, historians continue to debate the fate of Captain Briggs and everyone who sailed with him. Whether they were victims of panic, a tragic accident, or something no one has yet imagined, the truth disappeared with them into the Atlantic Ocean. The Mary Celeste remains one of history's most enduring maritime mysteries, a ship discovered in perfect condition, yet forever empty. 4. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse Mystery. December 15, 1900. Flannan Isles, Outer Hebrides, Scotland. On December 15, 1900, a routine supply ship approached the remote Flannan Isles Lighthouse, a lonely structure standing on a small rocky island off the western coast of Scotland. The lighthouse was isolated from the rest of the world, surrounded by violent Atlantic waves and towering cliffs. Its only purpose was to guide ships safely through one of the most dangerous stretches of sea in Europe. 3 lighthouse keepers were stationed there. By the end of that day, all 3 had vanished without leaving a single trace. No bodies. No witnesses. No clear explanation. More than a century later, the disappearance of the 3 men remains one of Britain's greatest unsolved mysteries. The Flannan Isles were never considered an ordinary workplace. Long before the lighthouse was built, local fishermen believed the islands were haunted. Many refused to stay there after sunset, claiming strange noises echoed across the cliffs at night. Ancient legends even described the islands as a place where mysterious spirits wandered among the rocks. Most people dismissed those stories as superstition. In 1899, the Flannan Isles Lighthouse officially began operating. It stood nearly 75 feet tall and overlooked steep cliffs dropping directly into the Atlantic Ocean. Because of its isolated location, 3 lighthouse keepers lived there at a time, maintaining the powerful light 24 hours a day. In December 1900, the 3 keepers were James Duckett, the principal keeper; Thomas Marshall, the second assistant; and Donald MacArthur, an experienced relief keeper known for his physical strength and fearless personality. Their daily routine was strict and carefully documented. Every task, every weather observation, every maintenance check, everything was recorded in the official lighthouse logbook. For weeks, nothing unusual was reported. Then, during the evening of December 15th, something unexpected happened. The crew of a passing steamship noticed that the lighthouse was completely dark. Normally, its powerful beam could be seen from miles away. That night, nothing. The captain reported the missing light, but severe storms prevented anyone from reaching the island immediately. Days passed. On December 26, 1900, after Christmas, the lighthouse supply ship Hesperus finally arrived carrying replacement supplies and relief keeper Joseph Moore. As the ship approached the island, Moore expected to see one of the lighthouse keepers waiting at the landing platform. No one appeared. The ship sounded its horn. Silence. A distress flare was fired. Still nothing. Feeling uneasy, Moore climbed the steep stone steps leading toward the lighthouse. What he found was deeply unsettling. The main entrance gate was closed. Inside, everything appeared strangely quiet. The kitchen looked as though someone had left in a hurry. Half-eaten food reportedly sat on the table according to some early accounts, although later investigations questioned this detail. A chair had been pulled away from the table. The clock had stopped. The oil lamps had been cleaned and refilled. The beds were unmade, suggesting the men had recently been living there. Yet there was no sign of any of the keepers. No blood. No struggle. No damage. No indication that anyone had forced their way inside. Most disturbing of all, 2 sets of heavy waterproof coats were missing. But one coat remained hanging inside the lighthouse. Investigators immediately realized something odd. Lighthouse rules required no keeper to leave the station during dangerous weather unless absolutely necessary. And it was considered almost unthinkable for someone to go outside without a waterproof coat. If one coat remained inside, why had that keeper apparently gone outdoors without it? A full search of the island began. The cliffs, the shoreline, the caves, every accessible area. Nothing. The men had completely disappeared. Investigators then examined the western landing platform, where supplies were normally unloaded. There they found signs of extraordinary storm damage. Iron railings had been twisted. A heavy supply box weighing over a ton had been moved from its position. Large rocks had been displaced more than 100 feet above sea level. Seaweed had been thrown high onto the cliffs. The destruction suggested enormous waves had crashed against the island with incredible force. Attention then turned to the lighthouse logbook. Several entries immediately attracted attention. One report described unusually violent winds. Another mentioned that Thomas Marshall, an experienced keeper known for his toughness, had been crying. Another claimed that Donald MacArthur, a man famous for fighting and fearlessness, had become strangely quiet. The final entry reportedly read, "Storm ended. Sea calm. God is over all." If genuine, the entries painted a picture of 3 experienced men becoming increasingly frightened by something they could not explain. However, years later, historians discovered a major problem. Many of these dramatic logbook entries likely never existed. Researchers examining the official records found no evidence that the emotional diary passages were authentic. They appear to have originated from later newspaper reports and books rather than the original investigation. Even without those disputed entries, the disappearance remained baffling. The official explanation suggested that one keeper may have gone outside to secure equipment during rough weather. A second keeper followed to assist him. The third then left the lighthouse after seeing both men in danger. A massive wave may have swept all three into the Atlantic Ocean before any could escape. It sounds reasonable. But several questions remain. Experienced lighthouse keepers understood the dangers of those cliffs. Why would all three abandon the lighthouse at the same time? Regulations specifically required that one man remain inside to keep the light operating. If the official rules were followed, at least one keeper should have survived. Another mystery involves the weather itself. Some historical weather records suggest that the violent storm may not have reached the Flannan Isles until after the men disappeared. If true, what forced them outside before the worst weather even arrived? Over the decades, alternative theories have continued to emerge. Some believe one keeper lost his footing, and the others died trying to rescue him. Others suspect a rogue wave far larger than normal struck unexpectedly. There are also theories involving secret government operations, though no evidence has ever supported them. As with many famous disappearances, paranormal explanations eventually appeared. Some claimed the keepers were taken by mysterious sea spirits described in Scottish folklore. Others suggested ghostly forces haunted the island. Alien abduction theories even surfaced during the 20th century. None have ever been supported by credible evidence. Today, the lighthouse itself has been automated. No keepers live there anymore. Visitors who reach the island often describe an overwhelming silence broken only by crashing waves and seabirds circling overhead. Standing on those cliffs, it is easy to imagine how small a human being is against the power of the Atlantic Ocean. Yet even after more than 125 years, one question remains unanswered. If the three keepers were swept away by the sea, why has no confirmed trace of any of them ever been found? No bodies. No personal belongings. No final message. Nothing. On a cold December day in 1900, three experienced lighthouse keepers walked into the isolation of the Flannan Isles. Somewhere between the lighthouse and the sea, they simply vanished. And to this day, no one knows exactly what happened on that lonely island. 5. The WOW Signal. August 15, 1977. Ohio State University Big Ear Radio Observatory, Ohio, United States. On the night of August 15, 1977, deep in the quiet countryside of Ohio, United States, a massive radio telescope known as Big Ear was scanning the universe as part of an ongoing search for intelligent life beyond Earth. The telescope had spent years listening to the endless noise of space, naturally occurring radio waves from stars, galaxies, and distant cosmic objects. Night after night, the computer printed long sheets of numbers and letters representing weak radio signals detected from the sky. Almost every signal had a perfectly ordinary explanation. But on this particular night, the telescope recorded something that no one had ever seen before. A signal so unusual, so powerful, and so perfectly matched to what scientists had imagined an artificial extraterrestrial transmission might look like, that nearly 50 years later, no one has been able to explain it. The discovery did not happen immediately. Several days later, astronomer Jerry R. Emin was reviewing stacks of computer printouts generated by the Big Ear telescope. Most of the pages contained endless strings of ordinary numbers. Then his eyes stopped on one particular line. Printed among thousands of ordinary characters was a strange sequence. 6EQUJ5. To anyone else, the combination looked meaningless. But to Emin, it was astonishing. The letters and numbers represented the strength of a radio signal over time. Normally, background radio noise produced very low values. This signal rose dramatically in intensity before gradually fading away exactly as expected if a powerful transmission had passed through the telescope's field of view. It lasted approximately 72 seconds. That duration was no accident. Because the Earth rotates, any fixed object in deep space would remain within Big Ear's narrow observing beam for about 72 seconds before moving out of view. The mysterious transmission matched that timing almost perfectly. Realizing what he was seeing, Eamon circled the sequence in red ink and wrote one simple word beside it. Wow! That handwritten note gave the signal the name it still carries today. The Wow! Signal. Scientists immediately became interested for one important reason. The signal appeared near the 1420 MHz hydrogen frequency. Hydrogen is the most common element in the universe. For decades, researchers involved in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI, had suggested that any advanced civilization trying to communicate across interstellar distances might choose this exact frequency because every technologically advanced species would likely recognize its importance. Finding an unusually strong signal at precisely that frequency seemed almost too extraordinary to ignore. The signal also appeared extremely narrow. Natural cosmic radio sources usually spread across many frequencies. Artificial transmissions, however, are often concentrated into a very narrow band. Again, the mysterious signal behaved more like something engineered than something naturally produced. Excitement spread quickly through the scientific community. Had humanity just intercepted the first message from another civilization? There was only one problem. The signal never appeared again. Scientists immediately pointed the Big Ear telescope back toward the same region of space. Nothing. They searched again. Nothing. Weeks turned into months. Months became years. The signal was never repeated. Without a second detection, confirming its origin became nearly impossible. Investigators first considered whether the signal came from Earth. Perhaps a military radar system. A satellite. An aircraft. Or another source of human radio interference. However, extensive analysis found no known terrestrial transmitter operating on that frequency at the time. The hydrogen line is internationally protected for radio astronomy, making accidental interference less likely than on other frequencies. Could the signal have come from a passing spacecraft? Again, investigators searched for possible explanations. No known satellites occupied the correct position. No space missions matched the timing. No evidence supported the idea. Another possibility involved natural astronomical phenomena. Perhaps an unusual pulsar. A quasar. Or some previously unknown cosmic event. Yet every known natural radio source behaves differently from the WOW signal. None matched its precise characteristics. As years passed, astronomers repeatedly observed the same region of space using increasingly advanced telescopes. Projects involving SETI, the Very Large Array, and other major observatories searched carefully for another transmission. Nothing was ever detected. The silence only deepened the mystery. Researchers eventually identified two possible star systems near the area where the signal appeared. Some speculated that if an intelligent civilization existed around one of those stars, the signal might have originated there. But there was no evidence of planets capable of supporting advanced life, and no follow-up transmission ever arrived. In 2017, a new theory attracted international attention. Astronomer Antonio Paris suggested that the signal may have been produced by a hydrogen cloud surrounding a passing comet. According to his research, two comets traveling through the area might have emitted radio waves near the hydrogen frequency. To test the idea, Paris observed similar comets using radio equipment and reported detecting signals that he believed resembled the WOW signal. For a brief moment, it appeared the mystery might finally be solved. However, many radio astronomers strongly disagreed. Critics argued that cometary hydrogen clouds are far too diffuse to generate such a powerful narrowband signal. Independent researchers also questioned the methods used during the observations. As a result, the comet explanation remains highly controversial and has not been accepted as the definitive answer. Another question continues to puzzle scientists. If the transmission truly came from an intelligent civilization, why did it occur only once? Some researchers suggest the signal may have been part of a narrow communication beam that briefly swept across Earth by chance. Others believe it could have originated from a rotating source that simply never aligned with Earth again. Another possibility is even simpler. Perhaps whoever, or whatever, sent it stopped transmitting long before humanity was capable of listening again. Despite decades of investigation, no evidence has confirmed any of these ideas. Of course, the WOW signal became one of the most famous pieces of evidence cited by people who believe intelligent extraterrestrial life has already contacted Earth. Books, television documentaries, and countless internet discussions have described it as humanity's strongest candidate for an alien message. Professional astronomers, however, remain cautious. The scientific method requires repeatable observations. One unexplained signal, no matter how remarkable, is not enough to prove extraordinary claims. Without additional evidence, the origin of the transmission remains unknown. Today, the original computer printout still exists. The word "wow," written in red ink nearly 50 years ago, has become one of the most iconic moments in the history of astronomy. It represents both the excitement of discovery and the frustration of unanswered questions. Modern radio telescopes are now thousands of times more powerful than Big Ear ever was. They continue scanning billions of stars across the Milky Way, listening for any sign that humanity is not alone. So far, nothing has matched the mystery of those 72 seconds. On August 15, 1977, a radio telescope briefly heard something unlike anything before or since. It wasn't repeated. It wasn't explained. And after decades of scientific investigation, the WOW signal remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in the search for life beyond Earth. 6. The Sodder Children Disappearance. December 24 to 25, 1945. Fayetteville, West Virginia, United States. On the night of December 24, 1945, as families across America celebrated Christmas Eve, the Sodder family gathered inside their two-story home in the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia. The house was filled with laughter, wrapped presents, and excited children waiting for Christmas morning. Within a few hours, the home would be reduced to ashes. 5 children would disappear without a trace. And one family would spend the rest of their lives believing those children had not died in the fire, but had been kidnapped. More than 80 years later, the fate of the Sodder children remains one of America's most haunting unsolved mysteries. The Sodder family was headed by George Sodder, an Italian immigrant who had built a successful trucking business after arriving in the United States. He lived with his wife Jenny Sodder and their 10 children. On Christmas Eve, the family enjoyed dinner together before several of the younger children begged to stay awake a little longer and play with their new toys. Jenny agreed. She reminded them to turn off the lights before going to bed and joined George upstairs. At approximately 12:30 a.m. on December 25th, the telephone rang. Jenny answered. A woman she didn't recognize asked for someone who didn't live there. Loud laughter and clinking glasses could be heard in the background. Jenny told her she had the wrong number and hung up. As she returned upstairs, she noticed something unusual. The downstairs lights were still on. The curtains remained open. She assumed the children had forgotten and went back to sleep. About half an hour later, she suddenly woke to the smell of smoke. The house was on fire. Flames were spreading rapidly through the lower floor. George and Jenny immediately rushed to rescue their children. They managed to get 4 of them safely outside. But 5 children, Maurice, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 5, were believed to be trapped upstairs. George desperately tried to reach them. He attempted to climb back into the burning house, but the flames and thick smoke forced him back. He then ran to retrieve a ladder that was always kept against the house. It was gone. He next tried using one of his coal trucks to climb onto the roof. Strangely, neither truck would start. Both had been working perfectly the previous day. Desperate, George could do nothing but watch as the house collapsed into flames. The fire department was called immediately. But there was another problem. The town's telephone operator couldn't reach the fire station. Instead of responding within minutes, firefighters did not arrive until approximately 8 a.m., nearly 7 hours after the fire began. By then, the house had been completely destroyed. Officials searched through the ashes and quickly reached their conclusion. The 5 missing children had died in the fire. The case appeared closed. But George and Jenny refused to accept that explanation. Their doubts began almost immediately. According to the official investigation, the fire had burned so intensely that the children's bodies had been completely destroyed. However, George found this impossible to believe. He knew that many household items, including kitchen appliances and metal tools, had survived the fire. How could 5 human bodies disappear without leaving recognizable skeletal remains? Later, experts pointed out that even extremely hot house fires usually leave at least some bone fragments behind. Yet investigators reported finding none that could be conclusively identified as belonging to the children. Then came another disturbing discovery. The local coroner eventually presented the family with several small bone fragments, claiming they were recovered from the ashes. Years later, independent examination suggested those bones may not have belonged to the children at all. Some researchers even argued they had likely come from an adult and showed no signs of exposure to the fire. The mystery deepened. George soon began recalling several strange incidents that had occurred before the fire. Months earlier, a man selling life insurance had become angry after George refused to buy a policy. According to George, the salesman warned him, "Your house is going to go up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed." At the time, George dismissed the comment as an empty threat. After the fire, it felt chillingly specific. Another visitor had inspected the home's electrical wiring shortly before Christmas. Instead of discussing repairs, he oddly pointed to the fuse box and claimed it would eventually cause a fire. Yet investigators later determined the electrical system was not responsible. Even more suspicious. Several witnesses reported seeing a man near the house carrying what appeared to be a block and tackle, the type of equipment capable of removing a ladder. Was this connected to the missing ladder? No one ever proved it. Then came one of the strangest clues. A bus driver claimed he saw people throwing what looked like balls of fire onto the roof of the house shortly before the blaze spread. Months later, George reportedly found a small green object in the yard resembling an incendiary device or military-style grenade. Whether it was connected to the fire has never been confirmed. The most astonishing reports came after Christmas. Several witnesses claimed they had seen the missing children alive. One woman believed she served breakfast to 5 children matching their descriptions at a roadside restaurant the morning after the fire. Another witness claimed to have seen them traveling in a car with 2 unfamiliar adults. A hotel employee later stated she saw children resembling the Sauter siblings staying with a group of Italian-speaking adults. None of these sightings were ever verified. Still, George and Jenny believed they pointed toward kidnapping rather than death. Convinced the official investigation had failed, the Sauters launched one of the largest private searches ever undertaken by an American family. They distributed thousands of posters, offered substantial reward money, hired private investigators, placed newspaper advertisements across multiple states. Years passed with no answers. Then, in 1967, more than 20 years after the fire, the family received an anonymous letter postmarked from Kentucky. Inside was a recent photograph of a young man who appeared strikingly similar to their missing son Louis Sauter. Written on the back was a cryptic message. Louis Sauter. I love brother Frankie. Illo boys. A 90132 or 35. No sender's name. No return address. Nothing else. George immediately hired a private investigator to travel to Kentucky and locate the man in the photograph. The investigator disappeared. He never reported back. His findings, if any, remain unknown. The photograph only deepened the family's belief that at least one child had survived. George and Jenny never stopped searching. They erected a large billboard along a nearby highway displaying the children's photographs and offering a reward for information. The sign remained standing for decades, becoming one of the most famous missing person displays in American history. As the years passed, numerous theories emerged. Some believed the children died exactly as officials concluded. Others argued the fire had been deliberately set and the children kidnapped, possibly because of George's outspoken criticism of Benito Mussolini and Italy's fascist government, views that had reportedly angered some members of the local Italian community before the war. Another theory suggested organized crime involvement. However, no credible evidence has ever confirmed these claims. Modern forensic experts remain divided. Some believe the fire could not have completely destroyed 5 bodies. Others argue that the collapse of the burning house and later disturbance of the site may explain the lack of identifiable remains. Unfortunately, because the original crime scene was poorly preserved, many crucial pieces of evidence were permanently lost. George Sauter died in 1969. Jenny continued believing her children were alive until her death in 1989. She reportedly kept the mysterious photograph of the young man for the rest of her life. Today, the Sauter house is gone. The billboard has disappeared. Most of the witnesses have passed away. Yet the questions remain. Why was the ladder missing? Why did both trucks suddenly fail to start? Why were there no confirmed remains? Who sent the mysterious photograph decades later? And most importantly, did 5 children truly perish in the Christmas fire? Or were they taken into the darkness while the world believed they had died? More than 80 years later, the disappearance of the Sauter children remains one of the most heartbreaking and enduring unsolved mysteries in American history. 7. The Lead Masks Case. August 17, 1966. Vintam Hill, Niterói, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. On August 17, 1966, 2 young electronic technicians left their hometown of Campos dos Goitacazes, Brazil, telling their families they were making a quick business trip to purchase equipment. Their names were Manuel Pereira de Cruz, age 32, and Miguel José Viana, age 34. Neither man had any history of criminal activity. Neither appeared depressed. Both were respected, hard-working professionals with families waiting for them at home. But just a few days later, their bodies would be found lying side by side on a remote hilltop. There were no signs of violence. No gunshot wounds. No stab wounds. No evidence of robbery. And resting beside each of their bodies was one of the strangest objects ever found at an unexplained death scene. Homemade lead masks designed to cover their eyes. To this day, investigators still cannot explain why the men died, or what those mysterious masks were meant to protect them from. On the morning of August 17, Manuel and Miguel boarded a bus toward Niterói, a city near Rio de Janeiro. Before leaving, they told their families they needed electronic components for work and would return shortly. Their behavior seemed completely normal. They carried cash. They wore formal suits despite the warm weather. And they appeared relaxed. Several witnesses later helped investigators reconstruct their final known movements. Around midday, the 2 men arrived in Niterói and stopped at a local electronics store. Curiously, they purchased nothing. Instead, they asked for directions before continuing their journey. Later that afternoon, they entered a nearby bar. One of the men bought a bottle of mineral water. The waitress later remembered something unusual. Although it was extremely hot outside, both men appeared nervous. They repeatedly looked toward the nearby hills as if expecting someone. When she commented on their formal clothing, they gave only a brief answer before leaving. Those were the last confirmed sightings of them alive. 3 days later, on August 20, 1966, a local boy was flying a kite near Vinton Hill, a remote area known for reports of strange lights and alleged UFO sightings. From a distance, he noticed 2 bodies lying on the hillside. Authorities were called immediately. When police arrived, the scene was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The 2 men lay peacefully on the grass. They showed no signs of struggle. No defensive wounds. No blood. Their expensive watches remained on their wrists. Their money was untouched. There was no indication that anyone had attacked them. It almost looked as though they had simply laid down and never gotten back up. Then investigators noticed the masks. Each man wore a carefully shaped sheet of lead over his eyes. The masks had no straps, no eye holes, and no way to see through them. They resembled protective goggles, but completely blocked vision. Nearby, police discovered several unusual items. An empty bottle of mineral water. A small package containing wet towels. A notebook. Raincoats, despite clear weather. And one cryptic handwritten note. The note became the centerpiece of the entire investigation. It read, 1630 be at the agreed place. 1830 ingest capsules. After effect, protect metals. Await signal. Mask. The instructions were precise, yet completely mysterious. What capsules? What signal? What metals needed protection? And why were lead masks? No one knew. Police searched for the mysterious capsules mentioned in the note. None were ever found. No containers. No wrappers. Nothing. Without the capsules, determining the exact cause of death became far more difficult. Adding to the mystery, the bodies had already begun decomposing. Medical examiners were unable to identify poison or toxins with the forensic technology available in 1966. As a result, the official cause of death was recorded as undetermined. One of the most important opportunities to solve the mystery had been lost forever. Investigators soon learned that Manuel and Miguel shared an unusual hobby. Both men belonged to a small group interested in electronics, scientific experiments, and spiritualism. During the 1960s, parts of Brazil saw growing interest in attempting to contact higher beings through meditation, electrical devices, and altered states of consciousness. Friends told police that the 2 technicians believed advanced spiritual experiences could sometimes be triggered using specific rituals. Some even claimed they had experimented with homemade electronic equipment during these sessions. Could the mysterious note have described one of those experiments? Many investigators believed so. According to this theory, the men intentionally took unknown capsules before attempting some kind of spiritual or psychological experience. If the capsules proved poisonous, their deaths might have been accidental. Yet this explanation left many questions unanswered. Why the lead masks? Another theory focused on radiation. Lead is commonly used to block harmful radiation. Perhaps the men expected to witness an intense flash of light. Or maybe they believed they were protecting themselves from dangerous energy. Some researchers connected the masks to reports of unidentified flying objects frequently seen over Vinton Hill during the 1960s. Several local residents claimed strange glowing objects often appeared above the hill. Some even reported bright orange lights on the evening before the bodies were discovered. These reports fueled widespread speculation. Had the men been waiting for a UFO? Were they attempting contact with extraterrestrials? Despite decades of discussion, no physical evidence has ever supported these extraordinary claims. Criminal investigators explored another possibility. Could someone have tricked the men into taking poison? Perhaps they had been murdered without visible injuries. But if robbery wasn't the motive, what was? Nothing valuable had been stolen. There were no fingerprints indicating a struggle. No footprints suggesting another person remained at the scene. Without toxicology results, proving homicide became almost impossible. Another curious detail emerged during the investigation. Months earlier, another electronics technician connected to the same social circle had died under similarly mysterious circumstances after conducting unusual experiments. Although police considered the connection, they found no evidence directly linking the two cases. Still, it raised troubling questions. Was this merely coincidence? Or part of something much larger? As the years passed, countless theories appeared. Some claimed the men were members of a secret occult organization. Others believed they participated in dangerous scientific experiments. Books suggested government conspiracies. Television programs promoted alien encounters. Paranormal investigators argued the note described preparations for communication with beings from another world. Each theory explained some details. But none explained everything. Modern forensic science might have solved the mystery had today's technology been available in 1966. Unfortunately, the bodies were buried long ago. Most physical evidence has disappeared. The mysterious capsules were never recovered. And crucial forensic opportunities were permanently lost. Today, visitors can still climb Vintom Hill. The location appears peaceful. Green grass. Rocky paths. A panoramic view of the city below. Nothing suggests that one of Brazil's strangest mysteries unfolded there. Yet the unanswered questions remain. Why did two intelligent technicians travel to that isolated hill? What were the capsules mentioned in the note? Who, or what, were they waiting to receive a signal from? And perhaps the strangest question of all. Why did they believe they needed lead masks before whatever happened next? Nearly 60 years later, the lead masks case remains one of the most bizarre and unexplained deaths ever investigated. Two men climbed a quiet hill carrying a secret known only to them. Whatever they expected to happen, they never came back to tell the world. 8. The Zodiac Killer. December 20, 1968. Lake Herman Road, Benicia, California, United States. On the cold evening of December 20, 1968, two teenagers parked their car along the quiet stretch of Lake Herman Road near Benicia, California. It was a peaceful area, popular with young couples looking for privacy. Nothing seemed unusual. There were no warning signs. No suspicious activity. Just an ordinary winter night. Within minutes, both teenagers would be murdered. Their deaths would mark the beginning of one of the most terrifying unsolved serial killer cases in American history. Over the next year, an unknown murderer would kill again and again, taunting police with letters, encrypted ciphers, and chilling threats. He gave himself a name that the world would never forget. The Zodiac. And despite decades of investigation, thousands of suspects, and the efforts of countless detectives, his true identity has never been proven. The first known victims were David Faraday, 17, and Betty Lou Jensen, 16. The young couple had gone on a date that Friday night. Sometime between 10:15 and 11 p.m., someone approached their parked car. Exactly what happened remains unknown. Evidence suggested David was shot at close range while standing outside the vehicle. Betty Lou attempted to run. She made it only a short distance before she was shot multiple times in the back. The killer disappeared into the darkness. At first, detectives believed it was an isolated double homicide. They had no idea it was only the beginning. 6 months later. On July 4, 1969, another young couple parked near Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, California. Inside the car were Darlene Ferrin, 22, and Michael Mageau, 19. Shortly after midnight, another vehicle pulled up behind them. The driver remained inside for a moment. Then he left. Minutes later, he returned. This time, he stepped out carrying a flashlight. As the bright beam shined into the car, the couple assumed he was a police officer. Instead, the man suddenly pulled out a 9mm pistol and opened fire. Both victims were struck multiple times. As the gunman walked away, he heard movement inside the vehicle. He calmly turned back and fired several more shots. Darlene Ferrin died shortly afterward. Remarkably, Michael Mageau survived despite suffering severe injuries. His description of the killer was frustratingly vague. He remembered a heavy-set white man, around 26 to 30 years old, with a large face and short hair. It was the first description investigators had. But it wasn't enough. Less than an hour later, the Vallejo Police Department received a chilling phone call. A calm male voice confessed to the shooting. Then he added something unexpected. He also claimed responsibility for the murders on Lake Herman Road 6 months earlier. Before hanging up, he quietly said, "I wish to report a murder. If you will go 1 mile east, you will find the kids in a brown car. They have been shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." Police traced the call to a public telephone booth. By the time officers arrived, the caller had vanished. Then came the letters. On August 1, 1969, 3 nearly identical envelopes arrived at 3 different California newspapers. Inside each envelope was a handwritten letter. Each contained 1/3 of a 408-character encrypted cipher. The writer demanded that the newspapers publish the cipher on their front pages. If they refused, he threatened to kill again. The newspapers complied. Within days, a California schoolteacher named Donald Hardin and his wife Betty Hardin successfully cracked the code. The message shocked investigators. It read in part, "I like killing people because it is so much fun." The message continued by claiming that murdering people was more exciting than hunting wild animals because humans were the most dangerous animal of all. The letter ended strangely. Instead of revealing his identity, it simply stopped. The killer had lied. A week later, another letter arrived. This time, for the first time, the writer introduced himself with 2 unforgettable words. "This is the Zodiac speaking." From that moment forward, the unknown murderer became known as the Zodiac Killer. The attacks continued. On September 27, 1969, college students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were relaxing beside Lake Berryessa. Suddenly, a strange man approached. He wore a black executioner's hood covering his entire head. Stitched onto the front was a white circle crossed by a vertical and horizontal line. The now famous Zodiac symbol. The man claimed he was an escaped prison inmate who only wanted money and a car. The couple cooperated. Without warning, he tied them up, then stabbed them repeatedly. After calmly walking back to his car, the killer wrote details of all previous attacks on Brian Hartnell's vehicle door using a black marker. He even included the dates. It was his signature. Brian survived. Cecilia Shepard died 2 days later. Only 2 weeks later, on October 11, 1969, Paul Stein, a 29-year-old taxi driver, picked up a passenger in downtown San Francisco. The trip seemed routine. As they reached the destination, the passenger pulled out a handgun. He shot Paul once in the head. Then, incredibly, instead of fleeing immediately, the killer calmly wiped down parts of the taxi, tore away a section of the victim's blood-stained shirt, and walked away. Several teenagers witnessed the crime from a nearby house and called police. A major mistake followed. Due to an error in the radio dispatch, responding officers were told to search for an African American suspect instead of a white male. As a result, one police officer reportedly passed a man matching the Zodiac's description walking calmly along the street. He was never stopped. It remains one of the greatest missed opportunities in criminal investigation history. Over the following years, the Zodiac mailed more letters. Some contained additional ciphers. Others included pieces of Paul Stein's shirt to prove the writer was genuine. He threatened to bomb school buses. Claimed more victims than investigators could confirm. Mocked police for failing to catch him. Several of his later ciphers remained unsolved for decades. Then, in 2020, an international team of amateur codebreakers finally solved the famous 340-character cipher. Surprisingly, it contained no hidden identity. Instead, it repeated the killer's disturbing philosophy and mocked investigators who believed they were close to catching him. The investigation became one of the largest in American history. Thousands of suspects were questioned. Millions of documents were reviewed. Fingerprints were collected. Handwriting experts compared letters. DNA testing was attempted decades later. Yet none of it produced a definitive answer. One suspect attracted enormous attention. Arthur Lee Allen. He matched several circumstantial details. Witnesses identified similarities. Searches uncovered suspicious evidence. But fingerprints, handwriting comparisons, and available DNA evidence failed to conclusively link him to the crimes. Another suspect. Another dead end. Over the decades, many other names emerged. Each seemed convincing. Each ultimately lacked conclusive proof. Modern forensic science has reopened hope. Investigators have analyzed stamps and envelopes for trace DNA. Digital image enhancement has improved fingerprints. Advanced genealogy techniques, the same methods used to identify the Golden State Killer, have also been discussed. However, no official announcement has ever confirmed the Zodiac's identity. The case remains open. Exactly how many people the Zodiac killed is still uncertain. Police officially connect him to 5 murders and 2 attempted murders. The Zodiac himself claimed dozens more. Whether he was telling the truth, no one knows. More than half a century later, the letters remain. The ciphers remain. The symbol remains. But the man behind them has never been identified. He terrorized an entire state. Humiliated investigators. Turned murder into psychological warfare. And then, he simply stopped. Whether he died, changed his identity, or lived out the rest of his life unnoticed, may never be known. The Zodiac Killer remains one of the most infamous unsolved criminal mysteries in history, a killer who wanted the world to know his name, but never his face. 9. The Istil Woman Mystery. November 29, 1970. Isdalen Valley, Bergen, Norway. On the morning of November 29, 1970, a university professor and his 2 young daughters decided to go hiking through the quiet Isdalen Valley, just outside the city of Bergen, Norway. The valley was known for its breathtaking scenery, but it also carried a darker reputation. Locals often called it Death Valley because of its steep cliffs, frequent accidents, and several unexplained suicides over the years. It seemed like an ordinary family outing. But deep among the rocks, they made a horrifying discovery. Lying in a small clearing was the burned body of an unidentified woman. She had no identification. No passport. No purse. No clues revealing who she was. And over the following weeks, investigators would uncover evidence suggesting she had lived under multiple false identities, traveled across Europe like a trained intelligence operative, and disappeared without leaving behind a single confirmed trace of her real life. More than 55 years later, no one knows who the Istil woman really was. When police arrived at the scene, they found the woman's body lying on her back between large rocks. The fire had severely burned the front of her body and much of her clothing. Nearby investigators recovered several unusual objects. A partly melted umbrella. A broken bottle. Fragments of burned clothing. A pair of rubber boots. And a plastic bottle that smelled strongly of gasoline. The scene immediately raised difficult questions. Had the woman taken her own life? Or had someone staged the scene to look like suicide? The medical examination only made the mystery deeper. An autopsy revealed that the woman had died from a combination of carbon monoxide poisoning and sleeping pills. Doctors found more than 50 sleeping tablets in her stomach. However, they also discovered severe bruising on her neck. Some experts believed the bruises may have occurred before death. Others argued they could have been caused by heat after the fire. No conclusion could be reached. Even stranger. The woman had no fingerprints on file anywhere. No missing person report matched her description. No family came forward looking for her. It was as though she had appeared out of nowhere. Police searched the surrounding area hoping to identify her. Instead, they found something astonishing. At Bergen railway station, investigators located 2 abandoned suitcases linked to the woman. Inside were dozens of carefully packed belongings. But almost everything had been altered. Every clothing label had been cut out. Manufacturer tags had been removed. Even personal items had identifying marks carefully scraped away. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to prevent the owner from being identified. The suitcases contained elegant dresses, wigs, multiple pairs of glasses, cosmetics, maps, a notebook containing strange coded entries, and several different currencies from European countries. The discovery suggested she had traveled extensively. But under what name? The notebook became one of the investigation's most valuable clues. It contained combinations of letters and numbers that initially appeared meaningless. After careful analysis, investigators realized they weren't random. They represented a coded travel record. By decoding the entries, police reconstructed the woman's movements across Europe during the months before her death. She had stayed in hotels throughout Norway, Germany, Switzerland, France, and other countries. But there was another surprise. She never used the same identity twice. Investigators eventually connected her to at least 8 different false names. Among them were Genevieve Lancier, Claudia Tielt, Alexia Zarna Mercier, and several others. Each identity came with different passports, different signatures, and different personal stories. Yet none belonged to a real person. Hotel employees provided fascinating witness accounts. Many described the woman as elegant, intelligent, and extremely private. She often spoke several languages fluently. Witnesses reported hearing her speak German, French, English, and possibly Dutch. Curiously, she often changed her appearance. Sometimes she wore dark wigs. Other times lighter hair. Different styles of clothing. Different names. Different personalities. Several hotel workers noticed another odd habit. Whenever she checked into a hotel, she carefully positioned her room so she could observe entrances and exits. Some believed she was watching for someone. Others wondered whether someone was watching her. As investigators reconstructed her travels, another strange pattern emerged. Several of the places she visited were located near sensitive Norwegian military installations. During the height of the Cold War, Norway occupied an important strategic position between NATO and the Soviet Union. This immediately attracted the attention of Norwegian intelligence services. Could the unidentified woman have been a spy? The theory became even stronger after witnesses described seeing her meeting unidentified men in various cities. Some meetings were brief. Others lasted only minutes. No one knew what was discussed. No photographs existed. The men were never identified. Police eventually commissioned a forensic artist to reconstruct the woman's face. Newspapers across Europe published her image. Thousands of people saw the reconstruction. Hundreds of tips poured in. None identified her with certainty. Investigators also examined her dental work. The results were unusual. Her teeth had been extensively repaired using expensive dental techniques uncommon in many countries at the time. Experts believed the work may have been performed somewhere in Central Europe, possibly Germany, Belgium, or France. Yet even this clue failed to reveal her identity. Then came another mystery. Witnesses reported seeing the woman hiking in the Istalin area several days before her death. According to one account, she appeared frightened and was walking with two unidentified men dressed in dark clothing. Police investigated. The men were never found. Whether the witness accurately remembered the encounter remains uncertain. As years passed, numerous theories emerged. The most famous is the espionage theory. Supporters argue that her multiple identities, coded notebook, frequent travel, language skills, and visits near military sites strongly suggest intelligence work during the Cold War. Some believe she worked for Eastern Bloc intelligence. Others suspect Western intelligence agencies. No government has ever confirmed such claims. Another theory suggests she was involved in international smuggling. False identities would have helped move valuable goods across borders. However, investigators found no evidence of illegal cargo or criminal associates. Some researchers believe she may simply have been a private individual desperately hiding her true identity for personal reasons. Perhaps she fled political persecution. Perhaps she escaped an abusive relationship. Or perhaps she had reasons that died with her. Again, no evidence proves any of these possibilities. Modern science has provided new hope. Beginning in the 2000s, Norwegian investigators reopened parts of the case. Advanced DNA analysis, facial reconstruction, isotope testing of her teeth, genetic genealogy. Each produced valuable information. Scientists concluded she likely grew up somewhere near the border between France and Germany before moving elsewhere during childhood. Even so, her exact identity remains unknown. In 2018, journalists working with Norwegian authorities launched an international investigation, interviewing surviving witnesses and applying modern forensic techniques. The renewed attention generated fresh leads from around the world. But despite decades of effort, no definitive answer has emerged. Today, the woman buried under the name Unknown Woman still has no confirmed identity. No family has claimed her. No passport has been authenticated. No government has acknowledged her. Whether she was a spy, a victim, a fugitive, or someone whose secret was simply too dangerous to reveal, may never be known. On November 29, 1970, an unidentified woman died alone in Norway's remote Istalin Valley. She carried 8 different identities. But not a single one told investigators who she really was. More than half a century later, the Istal woman mystery remains one of Europe's most fascinating and enduring unsolved mysteries. 10. The Tamamshud Case, the Somerton Man Mystery. December 1, 1948. Somerton Beach, Adelaide, South Australia. On the morning of December 1, 1948, just after sunrise, people walking along Somerton Beach near Adelaide, South Australia, noticed a well-dressed man lying against the seawall with his legs stretched out toward the sand. At first, no one thought anything was wrong. One witness assumed the man was simply asleep after drinking too much the night before. Another even recalled seeing him raise an arm slightly, believing he was brushing away mosquitoes. No one realized they were looking at a dead man. Within hours, police arrived at the scene. What seemed like a routine unexplained death soon transformed into one of the most baffling mysteries in criminal history, a case involving a mysterious coded message, a hidden scrap of paper with 2 Persian words, an unidentified man with no identity, and decades of speculation about espionage during the Cold War. More than 75 years later, although investigators have made remarkable progress, many of the most important questions remain unanswered. The deceased appeared to be around 40 to 45 years old, approximately 5 feet 11 inches tall, with an athletic build. He was clean-shaven, well-groomed, and dressed in expensive clothing. His polished shoes showed very little wear. He looked like a successful businessman. Yet something immediately caught investigators' attention. Every label had been carefully removed from his clothes. There were no identification documents. No wallet. No driver's license. No passport. Nothing revealed his name. Even stranger. His pockets contained only a few ordinary items. A pack of chewing gum. A bus ticket. A used train ticket. A comb. Matches. A packet of cigarettes that contained a completely different brand inside. Nothing suggested robbery. Nothing explained who he was. The autopsy deepened the mystery. Doctors found no obvious injuries. No signs of violence. No evidence of disease. The man appeared healthy. However, medical examiners believed he had almost certainly died from poisoning. The problem was that no poison could be identified. Despite extensive laboratory testing, investigators failed to detect any known toxic substance. Some experts suggested a fast-acting poison that leaves little trace. Others believed natural causes remained possible. Without definitive evidence, the official cause of death remained uncertain. Police searched every clue they could find. Days later, a breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Investigators discovered a small suitcase left in the cloakroom of the Adelaide railway station. The suitcase appeared to belong to the dead man. Inside were neatly folded clothes, shoes, basic personal items. And once again, nearly every identifying label had been removed. One name remained. T. Keane. Detectives immediately searched for a man by that name. They found one. But after careful investigation, he was ruled out completely. The suitcase only created more confusion. Then came the clue that made the case famous around the world. During a second examination of the body, investigators noticed a tiny hidden pocket sewn inside the man's trousers. It was so well concealed that it had been overlooked during the initial search. Inside the pocket, they found a tightly rolled piece of paper. Printed on it were 2 Persian words. Tamam shud. The phrase translates roughly as, "It is finished," or "ended." The words had been torn from the final page of an extremely rare book, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. Suddenly the investigation took an extraordinary turn. Police announced the discovery publicly. Soon afterward, a local man contacted investigators with astonishing news. He explained that shortly before the unidentified man was discovered, he had found a copy of the Rubaiyat inside his unlocked car. At first, he thought someone had accidentally left it there. After hearing about the investigation, he checked the book. The final page had been carefully torn out. It matched the paper found inside the dead man's pocket perfectly. The book contained another surprise. Written inside was a sequence of seemingly random letters arranged into several lines. To this day, no one has successfully decoded them. Some believe they represent a code. Others think they are merely meaningless initials. Professional cryptographers, military code experts, and amateur codebreakers have all attempted to solve the message. None has produced a universally accepted solution. The book also contained a telephone number. The number belonged to a young nurse named Jessica Ellen (Jo) Thompson, who lived only a short distance from Somerton Beach. When police questioned her, they showed her a plaster cast made from the dead man's face. Witnesses later claimed she appeared visibly shocked. Some investigators believed she nearly fainted. Yet she insisted she did not know the man. She admitted owning a copy of the Rubaiyat, which she had previously given to another man during World War II. That man was located alive. He still possessed his copy. Therefore, it could not have been the same book. The connection remained unexplained. As the investigation continued, more strange details emerged. Witnesses reported seeing an unidentified man carrying another person on the beach during the early morning hours before the body was discovered. Others remembered seeing someone standing near the seawall. Unfortunately, none of these accounts could be confirmed. By the 1950s, the world had entered the height of the Cold War. The mysterious coded message, the hidden pocket, the unidentified traveler, the missing identity, and the unexplained death. Together they inspired one of the most famous theories in the case: espionage. Some researchers believed the Somerton man was an intelligence operative. Australia had become strategically important during the Cold War, and nearby military facilities attracted international attention. Supporters of the spy theory argue that removing clothing labels, carrying coded messages, and dying from an untraceable poison all resemble methods associated with intelligence operations. However, no government has ever confirmed that the Somerton man worked for any intelligence agency. Another mystery involved his physical characteristics. Medical examiners noted that he possessed several extremely rare anatomical features. His calf muscles were unusually developed, similar to those of ballet dancers or people accustomed to wearing high-heeled footwear. He also had uncommon dental variations found in only a very small percentage of the population. These unusual characteristics made identifying him even more frustrating. For decades, investigators compared his fingerprints with records from around the world. Nothing. They published photographs internationally. Nothing. Thousands of missing person reports were examined. Still nothing. It was as though the man had never officially existed. Then, in the 21st century, science finally began making progress. The Somerton man's body was exhumed in 2021. Researchers extracted DNA using modern forensic techniques. The following year, genetic genealogy experts compared the DNA with large family trees. In 2022, Australian researcher Professor Derek Abbott announced evidence suggesting the Somerton man was likely Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer born in Melbourne. Subsequent investigations found strong genealogical support for this identification. Many experts now believe this is the most likely answer to the man's identity. However, not everyone agrees the identification has been officially proven beyond doubt. More importantly, even if his name has finally been discovered, the greatest mysteries remain. Why did he die? Who removed the labels from his clothing? What did the coded message mean? Why was Tamam-Shud hidden inside his trousers? And what connection, if any, existed between the man and Jo Thompson? Those questions remain unanswered. Today, the Tamam-Shud case stands as one of history's most fascinating investigations. A dead man without identification. A hidden message meaning, "It is finished." An undeciphered code. A mysterious book. Possible Cold War secrets. And a story that continues to challenge investigators nearly 8 decades later. On December 1, 1948, an unknown man was found dead on an Australian beach. His identity may finally have been uncovered. But the secret of how he died, and why he carried the words, "Tamam Shud," may never be known. 11. The Yuba County Five. February 24, 1978. Yuba County, California, United States. On the evening of February 24, 1978, 5 close friends left the city of Chico, California, after attending a college basketball game. They were excited because the following morning they were scheduled to compete in a basketball tournament, an event they had been looking forward to for weeks. Each of the 5 men had mild intellectual disabilities or mental health challenges, but they were known as responsible, dependable, and deeply committed to their daily routines. Their families described them as kind, cautious, and unlikely to take unnecessary risks. After the game ended, they stopped at a convenience store to buy snacks. Then they began driving home. They never arrived. Days later, their abandoned car would be discovered high in the snowy mountains, far from the route they should have taken. Over the following months, investigators would uncover one of the strangest disappearance cases in American history. 4 of the 5 men would eventually be found dead. The 5th would simply vanish. And even today, no one knows why they drove into the mountains that winter night. The 5 friends were Jack Madruga, 30, the owner and driver of the car. Bill Sterling, 29. Ted Whiter, 32. Gary Mathias, 25. And Jack Hewitt, 24. That evening, everything appeared perfectly normal. Witnesses at the basketball game remembered the group laughing and enjoying themselves. Afterward, they visited a convenience store in Brownsville, where they purchased soft drinks, candy bars, and snacks. The cashier later recalled that they seemed cheerful and relaxed. Nothing suggested anything was wrong. That was the last confirmed sighting of the group. When the men failed to return home, their families immediately became concerned. Missing person reports were filed. Search efforts began. Then, on February 28, for days after they disappeared, a forest ranger made an astonishing discovery. High in the Plumas National Forest, more than 70 miles away from the route they should have taken, sat Jack Madruga's 1969 Mercury Montego. The location made no sense. The men had driven deep into rugged mountain terrain during winter, climbing winding roads covered with snow. Their destination had been in the opposite direction. Even stranger. The car wasn't damaged. It wasn't stuck. Investigators later determined that it could probably have been driven back down the mountain with little difficulty. The fuel tank still contained gasoline. The keys were missing. The doors were unlocked. Inside the vehicle, police found the snacks the men had purchased only hours earlier. Nothing had been touched. Why would 5 men abandon a perfectly functional car in freezing temperatures? No one could answer. Search teams spent weeks combing the surrounding wilderness. Snowstorms slowed progress. The mountains were vast. 4 months. Nothing was found. Then, in June 1978, after the snow finally melted, a group of motorcyclists discovered a small U.S. Forest Service trailer nearly 20 miles from the abandoned car. Inside lay the body of Ted Whiter. The scene shocked investigators. The trailer contained enough food to keep several people alive for months. There were military emergency rations, canned food, blankets, warm clothing, a propane heating system. Yet most of the supplies had never been used. Ted had died of starvation and exposure. Medical experts estimated he had survived inside the trailer for 8 to 13 weeks after the group disappeared. His beard had grown significantly. He had lost around 100 pounds. Someone had carefully wrapped his feet in blankets to protect them from frostbite. This suggested he had not been alone when he first arrived. Nearby, investigators found the bodies of Jack Hewitt and Bill Sterling. Both had died from hypothermia. Not far away lay part of Jack Madruga's skeleton. His remains showed no signs of violence. The cause of death could not be determined. One man, however, was missing. Gary Mathias. Despite extensive searches, no trace of him has ever been found. No body. No clothing. No bones. Nothing. Nearly 50 years later, Gary remains officially missing. The trailer itself became the greatest mystery. Why didn't the men use the available food? The emergency rations included enough supplies to feed everyone for weeks. Most remained unopened. The propane heating system was fully functional. Although it required a simple valve to be turned on, investigators believe none of the men had used it. Warm clothing was also stored inside. Much of it remained untouched. If survival resources surrounded them, why did they die? Gary Mathias added another layer of mystery. Unlike the others, Gary had served in the U.S. Army and possessed outdoor survival experience. He knew how to survive in difficult conditions. He also understood military emergency equipment. Many investigators believe that if Gary reached the trailer alive, he would almost certainly have known how to operate the heater and use the food supplies. So why weren't they used? Another curious clue came from a witness named Joseph Shans. On the same night the 5 men disappeared, Shans suffered a heart attack after his own car became stuck in the snow along the same mountain road. While waiting for help, he later claimed he saw headlights approaching. He shouted for assistance. Instead of stopping, the vehicle continued. He also believed he saw several people, including a woman carrying a baby, standing near another vehicle. Because of his medical condition and poor visibility, investigators could never confirm exactly what he saw. Still, his account suggested the 5 men might not have been alone that night. Investigators explored numerous theories. One possibility was that the group simply became lost. Perhaps they accidentally took a wrong turn and panicked after encountering deep snow. However, families strongly rejected this explanation. The men knew the area reasonably well and had no reason to drive into the mountains. Another theory suggested they were being followed. Perhaps they encountered strangers or became frightened for reasons investigators never discovered. Yet there was no evidence of robbery or violence. Gary had previously been diagnosed with schizophrenia but had been responding well to medication. If he became confused or paranoid that night, perhaps the others followed him into the mountains. However, no evidence proves this happened. Others suspect an unknown third party. Someone may have persuaded the group to leave the main highway. Or perhaps another event occurred that investigators never uncovered. Again, there is no direct evidence. One of the biggest unanswered questions concerns Ted Whitehead. Medical evidence showed he survived for weeks. If another member of the group stayed with him initially, as the wrapped blankets suggest, where did that person go? Why leave Ted alone? Did they go searching for help? Did they die elsewhere? Or was it Gary Mathias, whose fate remains unknown? Over the decades, the case became known as the American Dyatlov Pass. Not because the circumstances were identical, but because both mysteries involve ordinary people making decisions that seem completely irrational. Why abandon safety? Why ignore life-saving resources? Why travel toward danger instead of away from it? Modern investigators continue reviewing the evidence, but time has made solving the case increasingly difficult. Many witnesses have died. Physical evidence has deteriorated. And Gary Mathias has never been found. Whether he perished somewhere in the wilderness, started a new life, or became the victim of something investigators never discovered, remains one of the greatest unanswered questions. Nearly 50 years later, the Yuba County 5 mystery continues to puzzle investigators around the world. 5 friends left a basketball game expecting to return home that night. Instead, their car was found abandoned in the mountains. 4 lost their lives under circumstances that defy easy explanation. And the 5th disappeared so completely that not even a single confirmed trace of him has ever been found. To this day, no one can say with certainty what truly happened on that cold February night in 1978. 12. The Oak Island Money Pit. 1795. Oak Island, Nova Scotia, Canada. In the summer of 1795, a 16-year-old boy named Daniel McGinnis was exploring the shoreline of Oak Island, a small, heavily wooded island off the coast of Nova Scotia, Canada. The island looked ordinary, covered with trees, surrounded by calm water, and known mainly to local fishermen. But while wandering through the forest, Daniel noticed something unusual. A large oak tree stood near a circular depression in the ground. One of its branches appeared to have been cut years earlier, and directly beneath it was an area of disturbed earth that looked as though someone had deliberately dug a deep hole before carefully covering it again. Curious, Daniel called 2 friends, John Smith and Anthony Vaughn, to help investigate. Together, they began digging. None of them realized they had just uncovered what would become one of the world's longest-running treasure hunts, a mystery that has lasted for more than 230 years, cost millions of dollars, claimed several lives, and still remains unsolved. The boys dug only a few feet before making their first surprising discovery. Around 10 feet below the surface, they encountered a layer of carefully placed wooden logs stretching across the hole. It looked man-made. They removed the logs and continued digging. 10 feet deeper, another wooden platform appeared. Then another. And another. Every 10 feet, they discovered another layer of timber. Someone had clearly engineered the shaft with remarkable precision. The boys eventually reached nearly 30 feet before giving up. They believed they had discovered buried treasure. Word quickly spread throughout Nova Scotia. For years, the mysterious pit remained untouched. Then, in 1804, a company called the Unsolved Company returned with professional equipment determined to reach the bottom. The workers dug far deeper than the original boys. At approximately 90 feet, they uncovered another intriguing object. A flat stone carved with strange symbols. According to later reports, the inscription supposedly translated to 40 feet below, 2 million pounds are buried. The message electrified treasure hunters. If true, the greatest hidden treasure in history might lie beneath their feet. However, there was one major problem. The original inscribed stone has since disappeared. Modern historians debate whether the translation was ever accurate, or whether the entire inscription became exaggerated through decades of storytelling. As the workers continued digging, disaster struck. At around 90 to 100 feet, seawater suddenly rushed into the shaft. Within hours, the excavation flooded completely. Every attempt to pump out the water failed. The deeper they dug, the faster the water returned. It seemed almost impossible. Investigators soon suspected the pit contained an elaborate flood tunnel connected to the nearby ocean. According to this theory, anyone attempting to reach the treasure would trigger a hidden engineering system that intentionally flooded the shaft. If true, who possessed such advanced engineering knowledge in the 18th century, or perhaps even earlier? Throughout the 19th century, company after company arrived hoping to solve the mystery. Each believed they would finally recover the treasure. Each failed. Some excavations discovered additional wooden platforms. Others uncovered coconut fibers buried beneath the beach, an astonishing find because coconut trees do not grow anywhere near Nova Scotia. Researchers suggested the fibers may have formed part of an artificial filtration system connected to underground flood tunnels. Whether naturally deposited or intentionally placed remains debated. By the late 1800s, Oak Island had become internationally famous. Speculation exploded. What exactly had been buried there? Some believed the pit contained pirate treasure. The favorite suspect was the legendary pirate Captain William Kidd, who was rumored to have hidden enormous wealth before his execution. Yet no historical evidence ever connected Kidd directly to Oak Island. Others believed the treasure belonged to the Knights Templar. According to this theory, medieval knights fleeing Europe secretly transported priceless religious artifacts across the Atlantic centuries before Columbus. Some enthusiasts even claimed the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant lay beneath Oak Island. Despite the popularity of these stories, historians have found no credible evidence supporting them. Another theory linked the island to Sir Francis Bacon, suggesting secret manuscripts proving he wrote Shakespeare's plays were hidden underground. Others argued that Marie Antoinette's missing jewels had been secretly buried there during the French Revolution. Some researchers even suggested Spanish gold, Viking treasure, or ancient religious relics. The possibilities seemed endless. The evidence remained scarce. The mystery took a darker turn as accidents mounted. Over the decades, numerous workers suffered serious injuries during excavation attempts. Then came tragedy. In 1861, a steam boiler exploded during one excavation. Several workers were badly injured. Even more devastating was the accident of 1965. For experienced treasure hunters descended into one of the excavation shafts. Suddenly, they collapsed. Rescuers rushed in one by one. They collapsed as well. The shaft contained deadly concentrations of hydrogen sulfide and other toxic gases. By the time rescue operations ended, 4 men had lost their lives. This tragedy gave new life to an old local legend. For generations, island folklore claimed 7 must die before the treasure is found. After the 1965 disaster, 6 people had died during treasure hunts. Believers wondered whether one final death would fulfill the mysterious prophecy. There is, however, no historical evidence that this legend existed before modern treasure hunting, and many historians consider it folklore rather than fact. Modern technology has transformed the search. Ground-penetrating radar, seismic imaging, underwater cameras, core drilling, high-resolution mapping. Researchers have explored areas impossible to investigate centuries ago. They have recovered intriguing objects. Ancient coins, fragments of parchment, metal artifacts, wood dating back hundreds of years. Yet none has conclusively proven the existence of a buried treasure chamber. Interest in Oak Island surged again after the launch of the television series, The Curse of Oak Island. The program follows brothers Rick and Marty Lagaina, who have invested enormous resources into modern excavations. Their team has uncovered shafts, tunnels, old tools, and numerous historical artifacts. Several discoveries suggest significant human activity occurred on the island centuries ago. However, no definitive treasure has ever been recovered. Today, historians remain divided. Some believe Oak Island hides one of history's greatest undiscovered caches. Others argue that the famous money pit resulted from natural geological formations later misunderstood by treasure hunters. Still others believe early excavators unintentionally destroyed crucial evidence long before modern archaeology could properly investigate. Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't whether treasure exists. It's why so many intelligent people have devoted their entire lives searching for it. Generations have spent fortunes. Companies have gone bankrupt. Lives have been lost. Yet the mystery refuses to disappear. More than 230 years after a curious teenager first dug into the earth beneath an old oak tree, no one can say with certainty what lies beneath Oak Island. A legendary treasure, a remarkable engineering project, or simply one of history's greatest misconceptions. Whatever the truth may be, The Oak Island Money Pit remains one of the world's most enduring unsolved mysteries, continuing to lure explorers with the promise that the next shovel of earth might finally reveal the secret hidden below. 13. The Voynich Manuscript. First documented in 1912, the manuscript itself is believed to have been created between 1404 and 1438. Discovered in Italy, currently housed at Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, United States. In 1912, a rare book dealer named Wilfred Voynich was searching through the library of an old Jesuit college near Rome, Italy, when he stumbled upon a mysterious handwritten book unlike anything he had ever seen. Its pages were filled with elegant illustrations, strange plants that did not exist, unknown stars and constellations, bizarre diagrams, women bathing in green liquid connected by impossible-looking pipes, and page after page of writing, written in an alphabet that no one on Earth could read. More than a century later, despite being studied by the world's greatest cryptographers, linguists, historians, computer scientists, and artificial intelligence researchers, no one has been able to prove exactly what the Voynich manuscript says, or even what language it is written in. It remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in history. When Wilfred Voynich purchased the manuscript, he immediately realized it was extraordinary. The book contained approximately 240 surviving pages, although experts believe several pages are missing. Every page was written by hand using black ink. Many were beautifully illustrated with colorful drawings. Yet none resembled ordinary medieval books. There were no recognizable titles, no author's name, no publication information, and no explanation of its purpose. Even stranger, the writing appeared remarkably consistent. Whoever created the manuscript had written hundreds of pages without making obvious corrections. It looked like a real language, but no one recognized it. For decades, scholars argued about its age. Some believed it was an elaborate 19th century forgery created to fool collectors. Others insisted it was genuinely medieval. The mystery seemed impossible to resolve. Then, in 2009, scientists performed radiocarbon dating on the parchment. The results were astonishing. The animal skin used to create the pages dated to approximately 1404 to 1438. The manuscript was genuine. It had existed for over 600 years. The mystery had only grown deeper. The manuscript appears divided into several sections. The first contains detailed drawings of plants. At first glance, they resemble medieval herbal medicine books. However, almost none of the plants match known species. Some appear to combine parts of multiple different plants into impossible hybrids. Botanists have searched for decades. No complete match has ever been found. Another section focuses on astronomy. Circular diagrams show stars, moons, suns, and zodiac symbols. Some zodiac illustrations resemble familiar constellations such as Pisces, Leo, and Scorpio. Around the circles are dozens of small female figures standing inside star-shaped compartments. Why? No one knows. Perhaps the strangest pages belong to what researchers call the biological section. These illustrations show hundreds of naked women bathing inside green pools connected by elaborate networks of tubes and containers. Some appear pregnant. Others hold stars or mysterious objects. The images have inspired countless interpretations. Ancient medicine, alchemy, fertility rituals, religious symbolism. None has been proven. The final pages contain dense paragraphs of text with almost no illustrations. If the manuscript truly contains a hidden message, many researchers believe this section is the key. Unfortunately, it remains unreadable. The writing itself presents an extraordinary puzzle. The alphabet contains around 20 to 30 recurring symbols. The words follow patterns remarkably similar to natural human languages. Some words appear frequently. Others are rare. Sentences have consistent structures. Modern computer analysis shows the statistical behavior of the text closely resembles genuine languages rather than random nonsense. This is one reason many experts believe the manuscript contains meaningful information. Yet no one knows how to read it. During World War II, the manuscript attracted the attention of some of history's greatest codebreakers. Several cryptographers who had successfully broken enemy military codes attempted to solve it. They failed. Later, experts from the National Security Agency, NSA, also examined the manuscript. They, too, found no solution. If professional codebreakers couldn't decipher it, what chance did anyone else have? As computers became more powerful, researchers hoped technology would finally unlock the mystery. Artificial intelligence analyzed the writing. Machine learning algorithms searched for hidden patterns. Statistical models compared it with hundreds of known languages. Some systems suggested similarities to Hebrew. Others pointed toward Nahuatl, an indigenous language once spoken in Mexico. Still others proposed forgotten dialects from medieval Europe. Every claim generated headlines. Every claim faced criticism. None achieved scholarly consensus. One of the oldest theories is that the manuscript describes medieval medicine. Perhaps the strange plants represent herbal remedies now forgotten. Supporters note that many medieval medical books contained illustrations of plants and bathing women. However, the impossible botanical drawings remain difficult to explain. Another theory proposes alchemy. During the Middle Ages, alchemists often concealed knowledge inside symbolic texts to protect secret formulas. The mysterious diagrams, flowing liquids, and unusual imagery seem consistent with alchemical traditions. Yet no direct evidence supports this interpretation. Some researchers argue the manuscript records an unknown language written using a unique alphabet. If true, the language itself may have disappeared centuries ago, leaving no surviving speakers. Others believe the text uses an elaborate encryption system so sophisticated that it still cannot be broken today. Then comes perhaps the simplest explanation. What if the manuscript is nothing more than a brilliant hoax? According to this theory, someone invented meaningless symbols arranged to resemble real language, hoping to sell the book for enormous profit. Critics quickly point out a major problem. Creating over 200 pages of convincing fake writing by hand, without repeating obvious patterns or making mistakes, would have required years of extraordinary effort. And why would someone devote so much time to a fraud centuries before modern collectors existed? The hoax theory remains possible, but difficult to prove. The manuscript's ownership history is almost as mysterious as its contents. Historical letters suggest it once belonged to Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who reportedly paid a fortune believing it had been written by the famous medieval philosopher Roger Bacon. Whether that belief was true remains unknown. Over the centuries, the book passed through several owners before eventually reaching Wilfrid Voynich in 1912. Today, it is preserved inside the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University, where it remains one of the world's most requested rare manuscripts. Modern imaging techniques have revealed hidden details beneath the ink. Researchers continue studying pigments, handwriting styles, and parchment construction. Every new discovery teaches historians more about how the manuscript was made. Yet the most important question remains unanswered. What does it actually say? Some believe the answer could transform our understanding of medieval science. Others suspect it contains nothing extraordinary at all. Perhaps it is simply the diary of an unknown scholar written in a forgotten code. Or perhaps it preserves knowledge that humanity has completely lost. Until someone successfully reads even a single confirmed sentence, no one can know. More than 600 years after it was written, the Voynich manuscript continues to challenge every generation. Thousands of experts have tried. None has succeeded. A beautifully illustrated book. Hundreds of pages. An unknown alphabet. An unknown language. And a message that has remained silent for centuries. To this day, the Voynich manuscript remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries ever created, a book that everyone can see, but no one can truly read. 14. The Roanoke Colony, the Lost Colony of Roanoke. July 22, 1587. Roanoke Island, present-day North Carolina, United States. On July 22, 1587, more than 100 English settlers landed on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina, United States. They had crossed the Atlantic Ocean with one ambitious goal, to establish England's first permanent colony in the New World. They brought tools, weapons, seeds, supplies, families, children, everything needed to build a new life. Among them was Virginia Dare, a baby girl born just weeks later on August 18, 1587. She became the first English child born in North America. The future seemed full of hope. But within 3 years, every single settler had disappeared. There were no bodies. No signs of battle. No graves. Only one mysterious word carved into a wooden post. Croton. More than 430 years later, historians still debate what happened to the people of the lost colony of Roanoke. The expedition was led by Governor John White, an experienced artist and explorer appointed to oversee England's newest settlement. Life on Roanoke Island quickly became difficult. Food supplies ran low. Relations with some nearby Native American groups became tense. The settlers realized they desperately needed more provisions if the colony was to survive. Reluctantly, they asked Governor White to sail back to England and return with food, tools, and additional settlers. White agreed. In late 1587, he departed for England, expecting to return within only a few months. He had no idea he would not see the colony again for nearly 3 years. Shortly after White reached England, war broke out. King Philip II of Spain launched the Spanish Armada, threatening to invade England. Queen Elizabeth I ordered nearly every available ship to help defend the kingdom. As a result, John White could not immediately return to Roanoke. He spent months desperately trying to secure another vessel. Every attempt failed. The delay stretched from months into years. Finally, in 1590, White obtained passage aboard a private ship bound for North America. He hurried back to Roanoke, hoping his family had survived. Instead, he found one of history's greatest mysteries. On August 18, 1590, exactly 3 years after his granddaughter Virginia Dare had been born, John White reached Roanoke Island. The settlement was eerily silent. No smoke rose from cooking fires. No children played outside. No voices greeted the arriving ships. The colonists had vanished. White cautiously entered the abandoned settlement. He expected destruction. Perhaps signs of attack. Instead, the houses had been carefully dismantled. Not burned. Not destroyed. Taken apart deliberately. It looked as though the settlers had planned to leave. There were no human remains. No weapons scattered across the ground. No evidence of violence. Only complete silence. Then White noticed something carved into one of the wooden fence posts surrounding the settlement. The word Crow. Nearby, another message had been carved into a tree. It simply read, Croton. Before leaving England, White and the colonists had agreed on a secret signal. If they were forced to leave because of danger, they would carve a Maltese cross beside their message. No cross appeared. To White, This suggested the settlers had not left under immediate attack. Perhaps they had moved voluntarily. The word Croton referred to a nearby island, today known as Hatteras Island, where a friendly Native American tribe lived. White immediately wanted to sail there. He believed his family might be alive. But fate intervened once again. Powerful storms struck the coast. The ship's captain refused to continue. Against White's wishes, the expedition returned to England. He never searched Croton Island. He never saw his daughter or granddaughter again. For centuries, historians have searched for the missing colony. The most widely accepted theory suggests the settlers joined the Croton tribe. Several early English explorers later reported meeting Native Americans with unusually light-colored eyes or European features. Some tribes also possessed English-style tools that puzzled investigators. Supporters argue the colonists simply integrated into local communities to survive. Over generations, their separate identity disappeared. This theory explains why there was no evidence of violence. Yet, no conclusive archaeological evidence has ever proven it. Another theory suggests the colony was attacked by hostile tribes. Relations between English settlers and some neighboring groups had already deteriorated. Perhaps the colonists were killed. However, no mass graves have ever been found. No battlefield. No weapons. No convincing evidence of a massacre. Others believe the Spanish were responsible. Spain viewed England's colonies as illegal. Spanish forces actively searched for English settlements along the Atlantic coast. Some historians suggest Spanish soldiers secretly destroyed Roanoke. Again, historical records contain no convincing evidence that such an attack occurred. Starvation presents another possibility. The colony struggled with food shortages from the beginning. Perhaps some settlers died while the survivors abandoned the settlement searching for help. Yet the carefully dismantled houses suggest planning rather than panic. Modern archaeology has produced intriguing discoveries. Beginning in the 1990s, researchers uncovered European pottery, metal tools, and other 16th-century artifacts on Hatteras Island. Some experts believe these objects support the idea that at least some Roanoke settlers lived among the Croton people. However, other historians argue the artifacts may have arrived through ordinary trade rather than permanent settlement. The evidence remains inconclusive. Another fascinating clue emerged from one of John White's own maps. Centuries after his death, researchers examined one of his surviving maps using advanced imaging technology. Hidden beneath a small paper patch, they discovered the outline of what appeared to be a previously concealed fort farther inland. Some historians suggested the colonists may have relocated there after abandoning Roanoke Island. Excavations followed. Artifacts from the late 16th century were found. But once again, nothing definitively linked the site to the missing colony. The mystery inspired countless legends. Some claimed supernatural forces swallowed the settlers. Others believed they discovered hidden treasure and disappeared inland. More imaginative stories spoke of curses, ghosts, and ancient magic. None have ever been supported by credible evidence. Today, most historians believe the colonists probably survived for some time after leaving Roanoke. They may have divided into smaller groups. Some may have joined friendly Native American communities. Others may have died from disease, starvation, or conflict. Without written records, the truth remains beyond reach. One fact continues to fascinate researchers. More than 100 people vanished. Families, children, craftsmen, farmers, entire households. Yet not a single confirmed skeleton has ever been identified as belonging to the lost colony. No cemetery. No final diary. No eyewitness account explaining their fate. Only one word. Croton. More than 4 centuries later, the disappearance of the Roanoke colony remains one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. England's first settlers arrived with dreams of building a new civilization. Instead, they left behind an abandoned village, a carved message, and a mystery that has refused to fade with time. Whether they became part of another culture, perished in the wilderness, or met a fate history failed to record, no one can say with certainty. The people of Roanoke simply disappeared, leaving behind one word and centuries of unanswered questions. 15. The Springfield 3. June 7, 1992. Springfield, Missouri, United States. On the morning of June 7, 1992, in the quiet city of Springfield, Missouri, 2 teenage girls were supposed to be celebrating one of the happiest weekends of their lives. The night before, they had graduated from high school. Family members expected them to be sleeping in after a long night of celebrations. Instead, they had disappeared. Along with them, a third woman was also gone. There were no signs of forced entry, no ransom note, no struggle, no witnesses who saw what happened. 3 women vanished from a suburban home during the same night. And more than 3 decades later, not a single one has ever been found. The case became known simply as the Springfield 3. The missing women were Cheryl Levitt, 47, a successful hairdresser and the owner of the house. Her daughter, Susie Streeter, 19, who had just graduated from high school. And Susie's close friend, Stacy McCall, 18. On the evening of June 6, 1992, Susie and Stacy attended several graduation parties with classmates. Like many teenagers celebrating graduation, they spent the evening visiting friends across Springfield. Originally, they planned to stay at another friend's home. But late that night, the house became crowded. The girls decided instead to spend the night at Susie's house with her mother. It seemed like a perfectly ordinary decision. It would become the last confirmed decision they ever made. Around 2 a.m., Susie and Stacy arrived at Cheryl's home. Neighbors later confirmed seeing their vehicle parked outside. The 3 women were now together. No one has ever confirmed seeing them alive again. The next morning, friends arrived at the house expecting to pick up Susie and Stacy before heading to a local water park. Instead, they found something deeply unsettling. The front door was unlocked. Inside, everything appeared almost completely normal. The television was on. The family dog was inside the house, calm and unharmed. Purses belonging to all 3 women remained in the home. Money, car keys, driver's licenses, cigarettes, personal belongings. Everything had been left behind. Even Cheryl's glasses, a pair she reportedly depended on for daily activities, remained inside. None of the women would likely have left voluntarily without them. Then the visitors noticed something unusual. The glass covering the porch light outside had been shattered. One of the friends quietly swept up the broken glass and threw it away before police arrived, unintentionally destroying what might have become valuable forensic evidence. Investigators have often described that simple act as one of the case's greatest lost opportunities. When officers entered the home, they found no obvious signs of violence. No blood. No overturned furniture. No signs of forced entry. Beds appeared slept in. The women's clothing remained inside. Nothing suggested 3 people had suddenly decided to leave forever. Yet, all 3 had vanished. Police immediately launched one of the largest missing person investigations in Missouri history. Search teams examined nearby woods, fields, lakes, abandoned buildings. Nothing. The women had disappeared without leaving behind a single confirmed physical trace. Investigators began reconstructing the final hours before the disappearance. Several neighbors reported hearing unusual sounds during the night. One woman claimed she heard a scream around 4 a.m. but assumed it came from a television. Another witness believed they saw an unfamiliar green van parked near the house. Descriptions varied significantly. No vehicle was ever conclusively identified. As the investigation expanded, detectives explored everyone connected to the victims. Former boyfriends, friends, neighbors, co-workers, family members. Dozens of people were interviewed. Several suspects attracted attention. None could be charged. One of the earliest theories suggested someone familiar with the women entered the house voluntarily. Because there was no sign of forced entry, investigators believed the victims may have opened the door willingly. Perhaps they recognized the visitor. Or perhaps someone impersonated a police officer or another trusted authority. No evidence has confirmed either possibility. Another theory centered on a convicted criminal named Robert Craig Cox. Cox had previously been convicted of kidnapping and robbery. He lived in the Springfield area at the time of the disappearances. Years later, he claimed he knew the women were dead. However, he refused to explain how he knew. Investigators examined him extensively. Despite his disturbing statements, no physical evidence linked him to the crime. He has never been charged. Another suspect involved a local grave robber who allegedly made strange comments after the disappearance. Again, the investigation found no conclusive evidence connecting him to the case. Like many leads in the Springfield 3 investigation, it eventually reached a dead end. Then came one of the case's most controversial rumors. In 2007, a crime journalist reported receiving information that the bodies of the 3 women had been buried beneath the parking garage of Cox Hospital during construction. Ground-penetrating radar reportedly detected unusual underground anomalies. The story generated national attention. Many believed the mystery was finally about to be solved. However, no official excavation confirming human remains has ever taken place. Without physical evidence, the theory remains unproven. Over the years, hundreds of tips poured into investigators. Some claimed the women were seen in neighboring states. Others believed they had been abducted into organized crime networks. Several anonymous callers claimed to know where the bodies were hidden. None of these reports led to confirmed discoveries. One of the most puzzling aspects of the case remains the complete absence of evidence. 3 adults vanished from a suburban home. No blood. No fingerprints identifying a suspect. No ransom demand. No verified sightings after that night. No bodies. Even experienced detectives have admitted the case defies normal criminal patterns. Modern investigators continue applying new forensic techniques to preserved evidence. DNA analysis has improved dramatically since 1992. Digital databases now allow investigators to compare unidentified human remains across North America. Every few years, new tips reopen old possibilities. Yet, the central mystery remains unchanged. What happened inside that house between 2 a.m. and sunrise? Did someone knock on the front door? Were the women forced into another vehicle? Did they know their attacker? Or did they become victims of a stranger who left almost no evidence behind? No one knows. The disappearance of the Springfield 3 profoundly affected the community. Parents became more cautious. Teenagers changed routines. For years afterward, many Springfield residents avoided being alone at night. The case became a symbol of how ordinary life can change forever in a single evening. More than 34 years later, investigators still receive occasional tips. The case officially remains open. Families continue hoping for answers. And detectives continue believing that someone, somewhere, knows the truth. On the night of June 7, 1992, 3 women went to sleep inside a quiet suburban home. By morning, every one of them had vanished. No goodbye. No explanation. No trace. Only an empty house. And one of America's most haunting unsolved disappearance mysteries. 16. The Beale Ciphers. 1885, the ciphers were first published, though the story claims the treasure was buried in 1819 to 1822. Bedford County, Virginia, United States. In 1885, a small pamphlet titled The Beale Papers was published in the United States. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary booklet. But inside was an extraordinary claim. According to the story, a man named Thomas Jefferson Beale had hidden one of the largest treasure caches in American history somewhere in Bedford County, Virginia. The treasure supposedly included thousands of pounds of gold, thousands of pounds of silver, and precious jewels worth millions of dollars. The exact location, however, had been locked inside 3 encrypted messages. More than 140 years later, treasure hunters, mathematicians, cryptographers, historians, and amateur codebreakers have all tried to solve them. Only one cipher has ever been successfully decoded. The other 2 remain one of the greatest unsolved code mysteries in history. And if the story is true, the treasure may still be buried somewhere beneath the hills of Virginia. According to the Beale Papers, the story began in 1817. A mysterious traveler named Thomas J. Beale visited the Washington Hotel in Lynchburg, Virginia. The hotel's owner, Robert Morris, later described Beale as polite, educated, and unusually secretive. Beale stayed at the hotel several times over the next few years. Eventually, before leaving on another journey west, he entrusted Morris with a locked iron box. Beale gave strict instructions. The box was not to be opened unless he failed to return after many years. Morris agreed. Years passed. Beale never came back. According to a letter found inside the box, Beale and approximately 30 companions had traveled into the Rocky Mountains in search of adventure. There, they supposedly discovered an incredibly rich gold and silver mine. Over several expeditions, the group transported enormous quantities of treasure back to Virginia. Rather than risk storing it in banks, Beale claimed they buried it inside a carefully constructed underground vault. The treasure supposedly contained more than 2,900 pounds of gold, over 5,000 pounds of silver, numerous valuable jewels. By today's value, the treasure would likely be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. To ensure the treasure could eventually be recovered, Beale prepared 3 encrypted documents. Each used hundreds of numbers instead of ordinary letters. The first cipher supposedly described the exact location of the treasure. The second listed the treasure's contents. The third identified the rightful owners and their descendants. Without all 3, recovering the treasure would be nearly impossible. Years later, Robert Morris finally opened the box. Inside were the 3 mysterious pages filled entirely with numbers. He tried for years to decode them. He failed. After Morris died, another unnamed individual inherited the papers. This anonymous researcher became obsessed with solving the codes. For years, nothing worked. Then he made a remarkable breakthrough. He discovered that cipher number 2 could be solved using the United States Declaration of Independence as a key. Each number referred to the position of a word within the declaration. The first letter of each selected word created the hidden message. The decoded text confirmed the treasure's astonishing contents. It described massive quantities of gold, silver, and jewels hidden in Bedford County. The successful decryption made international headlines. If one cipher worked, surely the others could also be solved. But there was a problem. Neither of the remaining ciphers responded to the same method. Researchers tried the U.S. Constitution, the Bible, Shakespeare, classical literature, historical documents, government records, military texts, thousands of possible keys. Nothing worked. Even modern supercomputers have failed to crack the remaining codes. The first cipher remains the most important. If solved, it supposedly reveals the precise location of the buried treasure. Without it, treasure hunters can only guess. For nearly 2 centuries, people have searched farms, forests, caves, hillsides, and old properties throughout Bedford County. Many claimed success. None produced verifiable treasure. The third cipher presents another mystery. According to the story, it identifies the heirs entitled to receive shares of the treasure. If true, even someone who found the vault might not legally own it. Yet because the code remains unsolved, those names remain hidden forever. Over time, serious doubts emerged. Many historians questioned whether Thomas Jefferson Beale ever existed at all. Despite extensive searches, no official records conclusively prove that a man matching his description undertook the adventures described in the pamphlet. Likewise, researchers found no reliable evidence confirming the enormous gold expedition. Could the entire story have been invented? Some scholars believe the entire Beale story was an elaborate 19th-century hoax designed to sell pamphlets. Supporters of this theory point out several suspicious details. The anonymous author never revealed his identity. The original letters have disappeared. No independent witnesses confirmed the treasure. And only one cipher conveniently proved solvable. Others disagree. They argue that cipher number 2 is far too sophisticated for an ordinary fraud. Its successful use of the Declaration of Independence demonstrates advanced cryptographic planning. Supporters believe the remaining ciphers simply require different keys that have never been discovered. Modern cryptographers remain divided. Some statistical analyses suggest the unsolved ciphers contain meaningful encrypted information. Other studies indicate they may simply be carefully constructed random numbers. Without the original encryption method, neither conclusion can be proven. The mystery has inspired generations of treasure hunters. Entire books have been written proposing hidden locations. Metal detector enthusiasts continue searching the hills of Virginia. Private landowners occasionally report new excavations. Every few years, someone announces they have finally solved the Beale ciphers. Every claim has ultimately failed under careful examination. One reason the mystery endures is simple. Unlike many legendary treasures, this one has never been conclusively disproven. There is no evidence proving the treasure exists. But there is also no evidence proving it does not. As long as the first cipher remains unreadable, hope survives. Today, the Beale ciphers remain one of the greatest unsolved cryptographic mysteries ever created. 3 pages of numbers. 1 partially solved secret. 2 codes that continue to resist every attempt at decryption. And somewhere, if the story is true, a buried fortune waiting for the person capable of solving a puzzle that has challenged the world for more than 140 years. Whether the Beale treasure is real, or one of history's most brilliant literary hoaxes, the mystery continues to inspire dreamers, codebreakers, and treasure hunters alike. Because sometimes, the greatest mystery isn't whether the treasure exists. It's whether the clues were ever meant to be solved at all. 17. The Max Headroom Incident. November 22, 1987. Chicago, Illinois, United States. On the night of November 22, 1987, television viewers across Chicago, Illinois, witnessed something that should have been impossible. Without warning, a live television broadcast was hijacked. The regular program suddenly disappeared. In its place appeared a bizarre figure wearing a rubber mask resembling the fictional TV character Max Headroom. The masked individual behaved erratically. He spoke in nonsensical phrases, mocked television personalities, made strange noises, and then, during a second interruption later that evening, performed one of the most disturbing acts ever broadcast on live television. The entire incident lasted only a few minutes. No one claimed responsibility. No one was arrested. And nearly 40 years later, it remains one of the most famous unsolved broadcast piracy cases in history. The first interruption occurred at approximately 9:14 p.m. The independent Chicago television station WGN-TV was broadcasting its nightly sports segment featuring sportscaster Dan Roan. Everything appeared normal. Then, the picture suddenly flickered. For a few seconds, viewers saw only distorted video. When the signal stabilized, Dan Roan had vanished. Instead, a man wearing a Max Headroom mask appeared standing in front of a moving sheet of corrugated metal designed to imitate the digital background used in the television show. There was no sound. The station engineers struggled to understand what had happened. About 25 seconds later, technicians regained control of the signal. The sports broadcast resumed. Dan Roan looked confused. He calmly remarked, "Well, if you're wondering what happened, so am I." At that moment, nobody knew they had just witnessed one of television history's strangest crimes. Engineers quickly concluded that someone had deliberately overpowered WGN's microwave transmission signal. In the 1980s, many television stations relied on microwave relay systems to send broadcasts between studios and transmission towers. If someone possessed a stronger signal and highly specialized equipment, it was theoretically possible to interrupt a live broadcast. However, doing so required advanced technical knowledge, expensive hardware, careful planning, and excellent timing. This was not the work of an ordinary prankster. Just over 2 hours later, the mystery became even stranger. At approximately 11:20 p.m., public television station WTTW was broadcasting an episode of Doctor Who. Once again, the screen suddenly went black. This time, however, the hijackers maintained control for nearly 90 seconds. Unlike the first interruption, audio was now clearly heard. The masked figure began speaking in a distorted voice. Much of what he said appeared completely meaningless. He mentioned television advertisements, quoted random phrases, mocked well-known Chicago television personalities. At one point he held up a can of Pepsi, jokingly referencing Max Headroom's famous soft drink commercials. The performance quickly became increasingly bizarre. The figure suddenly complained about broadcaster Chuck Swirsky. He waved a fly swatter, made strange humming noises. Then another unidentified person entered the frame holding what appeared to be a household object. Near the end of the broadcast, the masked man bent over while an unseen individual repeatedly struck him with what appeared to be a fly swatter. The attacker laughed. The masked figure shouted dramatically. Seconds later, the signal abruptly ended. Normal programming returned. Millions of viewers sat stunned. No explanation followed. Authorities immediately launched an investigation. The Federal Communications Commission, FCC. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. Broadcast engineers. Television experts. Everyone wanted answers. Who possessed the technical ability to hijack two separate television stations in one evening? How had they done it? And why? Investigators determined the hijacking almost certainly originated from somewhere within the Chicago metropolitan area. To overpower the legitimate microwave signals, the perpetrators likely positioned powerful transmission equipment directly in line with the receiving towers. Maintaining alignment while broadcasting required precision. Experts concluded the individuals responsible possessed significant knowledge of broadcast engineering. This was far beyond a simple home video prank. Unfortunately, no useful fingerprints were recovered. No identifying voices were recognized with certainty. The broadcast quality was too poor to reveal meaningful forensic details. Investigators interviewed engineers, radio operators, electronics enthusiasts, amateur broadcasters. No arrests followed. Almost immediately, theories began circulating. Some believed the hijackers were disgruntled television technicians familiar with broadcasting equipment. Others suspected university engineering students experimenting with transmission systems. Several investigators suggested the group may have included multiple people because one individual appeared to operate the camera while another performed on screen. Again, no evidence conclusively identified anyone involved. Over the years, internet communities proposed dozens of suspects. Some theories focused on local artists known for unusual performances. Others pointed toward electronic hobbyists, former broadcast employees, underground prank groups. Each theory gained temporary attention. Each ultimately lacked convincing evidence. One reason the case remains unsolved is the era in which it occurred. In 1987, surveillance cameras were rare. Digital forensic technology barely existed. Cell phones were uncommon. Internet records did not exist. The perpetrators left almost no trace. Had the same crime occurred today, modern cameras, mobile phone data, GPS records, and digital evidence might have identified the suspects within hours. The identity of the masked performer also remains uncertain. Was it the same person who organized the technical side of the attack? Or merely an actor recruited for the performance? No one knows. Even the location where the video was recorded has never been confirmed. Some investigators believe it took place inside a private residence. Others suspect a warehouse or workshop. The distinctive corrugated metal background has never been identified. Despite its bizarre appearance, investigators never believed the incident posed a serious national security threat. No political demands were made. No ransom requested. No threats issued. Instead, the hijacking appeared designed solely to confuse, entertain, and embarrass television broadcasters. In that sense, it succeeded perfectly. The incident became legendary among broadcast engineers. For decades, it has been studied as one of the most sophisticated examples of analog signal piracy ever successfully carried out. It also highlighted major weaknesses in television transmission security. Following the incident, many broadcasters upgraded equipment and improved signal protection procedures. Today, countless documentaries, podcasts, and internet investigators continue examining every frame of the footage. Audio experts enhance the voices. Video analysts study reflections. Cryptographers search for hidden meanings in the dialogue. No breakthrough has emerged. Nearly 40 years later, the mystery remains exactly where it began. Someone with remarkable technical skill interrupted 2 live television broadcasts. Performed one of the strangest public pranks ever recorded. Disappeared into the night. And was never identified. The Max Headroom incident remains one of the world's greatest unsolved media mysteries. Not because anyone was harmed, but because, in front of millions of viewers, someone proved that even live television could be hijacked. And then vanished without leaving behind a single confirmed clue. 18. The Hinterkaifeck Murders. March 31, 1922. Hinterkaifeck Farm, near Grobern, Bavaria, Germany. On the evening of March 31, 1922, 6 people living on an isolated farm in the German countryside unknowingly experienced the final night of their lives. The farm was called Hinterkaifeck. It stood alone, surrounded by dense forests and open fields, nearly a kilometer from the nearest neighboring home. For years, locals considered the farm strange. But in the days leading up to the murders, something even stranger began happening. The family discovered mysterious footprints leading from the forest directly to their house. There were no footprints leading back out. Someone had apparently walked onto the property and never left. Then came unexplained noises from the attic. Missing house keys. A newspaper that no family member had purchased. And the family's maid became so frightened that she quit her job, claiming the farm was haunted. Only a few days later, every person living at Hinterkaifeck would be brutally murdered. More than 100 years later, no one knows who committed one of Germany's most terrifying unsolved crimes. The victims were Andreas Gruber, 63, the owner of the farm. His wife, Casilia Gruber, 72. Their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, 35. Victoria's daughter, Casilia Gabriel, just 7 years old. Her son, Joseph, only 2 years old. And the family's new maid, Maria Baumgartner, who had started working at the farm only hours before the murders. Several days before the killings, Andreas Gruber made a disturbing discovery. Fresh footprints appeared in the snow. They led from the nearby woods directly toward the farmhouse. Gruber carefully followed them. But something made no sense. There were no footprints leaving the property. Whoever had entered seemed to have disappeared. Soon afterward, family members began hearing footsteps coming from the attic during the night. Whenever Andreas investigated, he found no one. Tools occasionally disappeared, then mysteriously reappeared. A house key went missing. No one knew where it had gone. The family also found a newspaper from the nearby city of Munich that none of them recognized. Someone had apparently brought it onto the property. The previous maid became increasingly terrified. She insisted the house was haunted. She repeatedly told neighbors she believed strange forces were living inside the farmhouse. Eventually, she quit her job and left. On March 31st, a replacement maid, Maria Baumgartner, arrived. It was her first day. Within hours, she would be dead. Investigators believe the murders began sometime during the evening. One by one, for members of the family were somehow lured into the barn. Exactly how remains unknown. Perhaps someone called for help. Perhaps they heard an unusual noise. Whatever happened, each victim entered separately. Each was attacked before realizing what had happened. The killer used a farming tool known as a mattock, a heavy combination of an axe and pick. The attacks were devastating. Andreas, his wife, Victoria, young Casilia, all died inside the barn. The 7-year-old girl survived the initial blows for several hours. Evidence later suggested she remained alive long enough to pull out handfuls of her own hair in agony before dying. It remains one of the most heartbreaking details of the entire case. After killing the 4 victims in the barn, the murderer entered the farmhouse. Inside, the 2-year-old Joseph was asleep in his crib. He was killed where he lay. The new maid, Maria Baumgartner, was murdered in her bedroom. She had worked at the farm for less than a single day. Normally, a crime this brutal would trigger immediate concern. But Hinterkaifeck's isolation delayed discovery. Neighbors noticed the family failed to attend church that Sunday. Children from the farm did not appear at school. The mail remained untouched. Still, no one immediately investigated. It wasn't until April 4, 1922, 4 days later, that neighbors entered the property. Inside, they discovered all 6 bodies. Then investigators found something deeply unsettling. Despite the murders occurring days earlier, Someone had apparently continued living at the farm after the killings. The cattle had been fed. The horses had received water. Meals had been prepared. The fireplace had been used. Fresh bread had been eaten. Whoever committed the murders may have remained at the farm for several days, living among the bodies. Police launched one of the largest murder investigations in German history. Hundreds of suspects were questioned. Thousands of witness statements were collected. The murder weapon, the mattock, was eventually discovered hidden beneath floorboards in the farm. Yet, no fingerprints. No eyewitnesses. No confession. No arrest. One of the earliest suspects was Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a neighboring farmer. He reportedly had a complicated relationship with Victoria Gabriel and may have believed he was the father of young Joseph. His behavior after the bodies were discovered also attracted attention. Witnesses claimed he moved through the crime scene unusually confidently, even unlocking doors that others believed were locked. Some investigators considered this suspicious. However, no physical evidence ever connected him to the murders. He consistently denied involvement. Another theory involved robbery. But investigators quickly rejected it. Money remained inside the farmhouse. Valuable possessions had not been stolen. If robbery had been the motive, the killer strangely ignored the family's wealth. Some researchers suggested revenge. Andreas Gruber reportedly had conflicts with neighbors. Others pointed to disturbing rumors involving family relationships that created tension within the local community. While such rumors fueled speculation, none provided evidence identifying a killer. Another theory proposes the murderer had secretly been hiding at the farm before the attacks. The mysterious footprints. The attic noises. The missing newspaper. The stolen key. All suggest someone may have been secretly living on the property for days before striking. If true, the family may have unknowingly shared their home with their future killer. Modern criminal profilers have examined the case. Many believe the murders were deeply personal rather than random. The victims were killed methodically. The killer appeared familiar with the farm. Remaining there afterward suggests remarkable confidence and emotional control. Some profilers believe only someone known to the family could have acted so calmly. Yet, without physical evidence, this remains only a theory. Over the decades, the Hinterkaifeck murders inspired countless books, documentaries, films, and criminal studies. Several modern investigations re-examine surviving evidence using forensic science. Unfortunately, much of the original evidence had been lost or destroyed during World War II. DNA testing became impossible. Critical crime scene documentation disappeared. The opportunity to solve the mystery faded with time. Today, the original farm no longer exists. The buildings were demolished in 1923, 1 year after the murders. Only a small memorial marks the location where the farmhouse once stood. Visitors who walk through the quiet fields see nothing unusual. Yet beneath that peaceful landscape lies the memory of one of Europe's darkest unsolved crimes. More than 100 years later, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of history's most chilling mysteries. 6 innocent people. A remote farmhouse. Footprints leading in, but not out. A killer who may have lived beside the victims before the murders, and stayed among their bodies afterward. Who entered Hinterkaifeck that cold spring night? Why were the family targeted? And how did the murderer disappear without leaving behind a single answer? A century has passed. The farm is gone. The witnesses are gone. But the mystery of Hinterkaifeck refuses to die.